Hello everyone, I am Alex and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? What time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The stranger in the old uniform sat perfectly still. Their clothes looked like they belonged in a museum, not on the 11:55 p.m. train to Millbrook. I noticed dark stains on the sleeve. The fabric was torn in places. When they lifted their head and nodded at me, their face was pale and gaunt in the fluorescent light. Then the train plunged into the Winchester tunnel, and when we emerged, 10 seconds later, the seat across from me was empty. I should start from the beginning. My name is David Chen, and I work as an IT consultant in Boston. That night, I was heading home after a late meeting with a difficult client. It was Thursday, November 14th, and temperature had dropped below freezing. I remember checking my phone, 11:47 p.m., as I rushed down the platform at South Station to catch the last train of the night. The station was almost deserted. My footsteps echoed off the concrete as I hurried past closed shops and darkened windows. A cleaning crew mopped the floor near the restrooms. A night security guard dozed in his chair. The electronic board showed only 2 departures left, my train to Millbrook and another heading north to Maine. I reached platform 7 just as they made the final boarding call. The train doors hissed open and I climbed aboard, breathing hard from my sprint. Car 2574 was empty except for an elderly woman dozing near the front with headphones on. I walked to the middle of the car, dropped into a window seat, and set my laptop bag on the floor. The doors closed with a pneumatic whoosh. The train pulled away from the platform, wheels clacking against the rails. Outside, the station lights slid past and disappeared. We entered the maze of tracks leading out of Boston, passing abandoned industrial buildings and graffiti-covered walls. My breath fogged the window. The heating system hummed, pushing warm air through the vents. I pulled out my phone to check some emails, but the signal was weak. The screen showed only 1 bar. I was exhausted after the long day and just wanted to get home. My wife Janet would be asleep by now. She always left the porch light on for me when I worked late. The conductor came through, checking tickets. He was a heavy-set man with gray hair and reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck. He barely glanced at my monthly pass before moving on. The old woman was still sleeping, her head nodding with the motion of the train. We passed through the suburbs, the familiar stations sliding by in the darkness. Back Bay, Ruggles, Forest Hills. The spaces between stops grew longer. Houses and buildings became scarce. Bare tree branches scratched against the night sky. I must have dozed off for a few minutes. When I opened my eyes and looked across the aisle, someone was sitting in the seat directly opposite me. I hadn't heard them board at any of the stops. They wore what looked like an old railroad uniform, dark blue with brass buttons down the front. The cut of the jacket seemed oddly formal and outdated, like something from a historical photo. A matching cap sat low over their eyes. Their hands were folded in their lap, perfectly still. The strange thing was how the fabric looked worn and damaged. There were dark stains on the sleeve, and tears in several places, as if the uniform had been through some kind of accident. The brass buttons were tarnished, almost black. I glanced around the car, but we were alone now. The old woman must have gotten off at one of the earlier stops while I was sleeping. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Outside, trees and occasional houses flew past in the darkness. I tried not to stare at the stranger, but something about them felt wrong. Their stillness was unnatural. I couldn't even see if they were breathing. Their hands were pale and waxy where they rested on their lap. The train swayed and rattled. My phone showed 12:17 a.m. We were about halfway to Millbrook. I knew the Winchester Tunnel was coming up soon. A long, dark stretch where the tracks went under a hill. I looked up from my phone and found the stranger's head had turned toward me. Their face was gaunt and colorless, with deep shadows around the eyes. A thin smile stretched across their bloodless lips. They nodded once, a deliberate movement. My heart started pounding. Sweat broke out on my forehead despite the cold. I wanted to get up and move to another seat, but my body felt frozen in place. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine. They were dark, empty pits in that pale face. The train's whistle sounded, echoing off the hills. We were approaching the tunnel. The stranger's smile widened slightly, showing teeth that gleamed too white in the fluorescent light. They raised one hand in a small wave. The tunnel mouth loomed ahead, a black hole in the hillside. We plunged into darkness. The windows turned into mirrors, reflecting the harsh interior lights. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. For exactly 10 seconds, we rode through the pitch-black tunnel. I counted each second, staring at the empty seat across from me in the reflection. When we emerged into the moonlight on the other side, the stranger was gone. I jumped up immediately, my legs shaking. I searched the entire train car. It was completely empty except for me. There was no sign anyone had been sitting in that seat. No impression in the fabric, no footprints on the floor. I sank back into my seat, hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. The screen showed no signal. I needed to document what had happened while it was fresh in my mind. Opening the Notes app, I started typing everything I could remember about the stranger's appearance. The uniform had been a dark navy blue with 2 rows of brass buttons down the front. The cut was distinctly old-fashioned. High collar, fitted waist, long tails and back. The cap had a short black visor and a tarnished metal badge. The fabric had been heavily damaged, with tears and dark stains that looked unsettlingly like dried blood. My fingers flew across the screen as I recorded every detail: pale, waxy skin, sunken eyes, unnatural stillness. The deliberate nod and wave just before the tunnel. I knew it would sound crazy, but I had to get it all down. The train continued through the night. We passed through Canton Junction, then Sharon. At each stop, I tensed up expecting the stranger to reappear, but the car remained empty. The conductor came through once more, barely looking at me as he passed. I pulled up the web browser on my phone and searched for information about the Winchester Tunnel. Most results were just basic facts about its construction in the late 1800s. But one link caught my eye, a news article from 1926 about a train accident in the tunnel. The article described how a passenger train had derailed inside the tunnel on a November night, killing several railroad employees. The cause was never definitively determined. There was a grainy black and white photo showing rescue workers at the tunnel entrance. In the background, barely visible, were what looked like bodies covered with sheets. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I searched for more information about the accident, but my signal kept cutting out. The few details I could find mentioned that some of the victims were never properly identified. Their bodies were too badly damaged in the crash. The train whistle sounded again, startling me. We were approaching Millbrook Station. I stopped. The familiar buildings came into view. The old mill converted to apartments, the lumber yard, the strip mall on the hill. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light on the empty parking lot. As we slowed for the station, I gathered my things quickly, wanting to get off the train as fast as possible. But when I stood up, something caught my eye. There on the seat across from me was a small brass button, tarnished almost black. I reached out with trembling fingers and picked it up. The metal was ice cold to the touch. Turning it over, I could just make out an engraved design, an old railroad company logo I didn't recognize. I dropped the button into my coat pocket without really knowing why. Maybe I needed physical proof that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The train doors opened with a hiss. I practically ran onto the platform, my laptop bag bouncing against my leg. The cold air hit my face like a slap. My breath came out in white clouds under the station lights. The platform was deserted except for me. The train pulled away, wheels clacking, and disappeared into the darkness. I stood there for several minutes, watching until the red taillights vanished around a curve. My heart was still racing. I walked quickly to my car in the parking lot, looking over my shoulder every few steps. The button felt like a cold weight in my pocket. The drive home was a blur. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a pale face with dark eyes staring back at me. When I got home, all the lights were off except for the porch light Janet had left on. I went straight to my home office and opened my laptop. I needed to research everything I could find about that 1926 tunnel accident while it was still fresh in my mind. Over the next several hours, I dug through old newspaper archives and historical records. The accident had happened on November 14th, 1926, exactly 98 years ago to the day. 5 railroad employees had died in the crash, including 3 conductors. The official report blamed brake failure, but there were inconsistencies in the witness statements. I found more photos from the accident scene. In one photo, partially visible behind some rescue workers, was a conductor in a dark uniform with brass buttons. His face was turned away from the camera. The image was too blurry to make out details. But something about the way he stood, perfectly still, hands folded, sent a chill down my spine. The brass button sat on my desk beside the laptop. Every so often I would pick it up, feeling its unnatural coldness. The engraved logo matched one I found in an old railroad company document from the 1920s. That company had gone bankrupt and been absorbed by larger railroads decades ago. Around 4 a.m., my eyes burning from staring at the screen. I finally went up to bed. Janet stirred slightly as I slid under the covers, but didn't wake up. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the wind in the trees outside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face and empty eyes. I called in sick to work the next day. I couldn't face getting on another train. Instead, I spent hours going through more historical records and accident reports. I found a list of the victims' names and photos of their graves in local cemeteries, but the conductor from that blurry photo wasn't among them. That evening, I drove to the Winchester Tunnel. It looked exactly like the old photos. A dark arch cut into the hillside, railroad tracks disappearing into blackness. I stood at the fence marking the railroad property line, watching as trains emerged from the tunnel mouth. Each time I half expected to see a figure in an old uniform standing in one of the windows. The brass button remained ice cold no matter how long I held it. Sometimes late at night I would take it out and study the tarnished surface, the ancient company logo. Once, I could have sworn I saw pale fingers reaching for it from the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, I was alone. I've taken a different route to work. Since then, even though it adds an hour to my commute, I can't bring myself to ride through that tunnel again. The button sits in my desk drawer now. Sometimes late at night I hear it, shifting around in there as if moved by unseen hands. I've tried to convince myself there must be some rational explanation for what I saw on the train that night. Maybe I was overtired and hallucinating. Maybe it was an elaborate prank. But then I take out that cold brass button and remember the stranger's pale face, the dark stains on their uniform, the way they nodded and waved just before we entered the tunnel. And I wonder, do they appear to other passengers on late-night trains? Do they still ride that same route remembering their final journey? Or was there something special about that particular night, exactly 98 years after the
accident?
I may never know the answers, but one thing is certain. I'll never forget that ride. On the last train home, or the stranger in the old uniform who disappeared in the Winchester Tunnel. Sometimes on cold nights, I think I can hear a train whistle echoing off the hills, and I wonder if they're still out there, riding the dark rails, nodding to lonely passengers before vanishing into the shadows. The brass button remains ice cold in my desk drawer. Sometimes, I'm tempted to take it back to the tunnel, leave it there where it came from. But something stops me every time. Maybe it's fear of what or who might be waiting there to take it back. So I keep the button, this one piece of evidence that it really happened. And I never take the last train home anymore. I'd rather drive the long way around, avoiding that tunnel and whatever still rides the rails through the darkness, wearing an old uniform, stained with memories of that fatal night nearly a century ago. The first time I noticed my tools weren't where I left them, I blamed my failing memory. The second time I blamed the whiskey. By the third time, I knew something was wrong in that old barn. I bought the property in western Massachusetts last fall, 40 acres with a rundown farmhouse and a massive 19th century barn that needed serious work. The house was livable enough, but that barn drew me in from day one. It's 25 feet tall at the ridge beam, hand-hewn posts thick as tree trunks, with those old wooden pegs holding the joints together, a relic from when men built things to last centuries. The previous owner, Mrs. Henderson, practically gave it away. Her husband died 15 years ago, and she couldn't maintain it anymore. The barn had been slowly rotting for decades. Most folks would have torn it down, but I restore old buildings for a living. This was my retirement project. Fix up the barn, maybe turn it into a workshop or studio space. For the first few weeks, everything went fine. I cleared out decades of junk, replaced rotted sills, and started repairing the foundation. Basic stuff. Then the weird stuff started happening. Monday morning, I came out to find my hammer on the opposite workbench from where I'd left it. My chisels had been arranged in size order. The pile of old shingles I'd torn off was stacked neatly instead of scattered where I dumped them. I checked the padlock on the door, still locked key in my pocket. No signs of forced entry. Windows were intact, though grimy with age. I told myself I must have organized things before leaving yesterday and forgotten. Tuesday morning, same thing. Tools rearranged, materials sorted. This time I knew damn well I hadn't done it. I'd knocked off early because of rain, leaving everything scattered. Now it looked like some obsessive-compulsive handyman had spent hours organizing my workspace. I'm not a superstitious man. I've worked construction and restoration for 30 years. Old buildings make weird noises. They settle and creak. But this was different. This was deliberate. Wednesday morning, I photographed exactly where I left everything. Thursday morning, I compared the new photos to the old ones. Major differences. The wheelbarrow had moved 6 feet. My power tools were lined up by cord length. Even my coffee thermos had been washed. I installed a motion-activated game camera, the kind hunters use. The memory card showed nothing but empty rooms and occasional mice. I set up a second camera, still nothing. By week 2, I was starting to get nervous about going out there. Not scared exactly. I'm a 60-year-old man who has worked physical labor his whole life. I don't scare easy, but something was deeply wrong. The activity escalated. Now tools would be arranged in geometric patterns. Materials would be sorted by type and size. Once I found all my hammers arranged in a perfect circle, handles pointing inward like some kind of demented clock face, I started leaving notes. Please stop moving my tools. Who are you? What do you want? The notes disappeared. No response. I asked around town. The locals knew the farm, old Jim Henderson, but nobody had stories about strange happenings in the barn. Mrs. Henderson just said that Jim spent countless hours out there, puttering around before he died. Then came the day I found the bones. I was digging out the old center post foundation to pour new concrete. The post had rotted where it met the ground, and I needed to replace it. 4 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. At first I thought it was ledge. In this part of Massachusetts, you hit granite everywhere you dig. But it was a box, old wood, maybe cedar, about 2 feet square, heavy. The wood was preserved by the soil, still mostly intact. No lock, just corroded hinges and a simple latch. I should have left it alone. Should have called the police right then. But I didn't. I opened it. Inside were bones, human bones, small ones, finger bones, ribs, vertebrae. No skull, no large leg or arm bones. Just the small pieces packed carefully in dirt and old cloth. I closed the box and sat there sweating, despite the October chill. My hands shook as I lit a cigarette, my first in 10 years. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those bones in the dark barn. Around 3 a.m., I heard machinery start up, a circular saw running full blast. I grabbed my shotgun and ran out there in my underwear. The saw was running, but nobody was near it as I watched it shut off by itself. The padlock was still secure. The next morning, every power tool I owned was arranged in a spiral pattern on the floor. The bone box sat in the center, open. The bones had been carefully laid out in an anatomical order. I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived within an hour. He's a young guy with a serious face. He took pictures and called it in. Soon the barn was crawling with state police from the medical examiner's office. They removed the bones for analysis. Initial estimates placed them at least 30 years old, probably belonging to a child between 8 and 12 years old. They searched the entire foundation but found nothing else. I gave them Mrs. Henderson's contact information. She seemed genuinely shocked. She said Jim never mentioned anything about bones. He'd built that center post himself in 1982. She remembered because he talked about what a big job it was. The same year a 10-year-old boy disappeared from 2 towns over. Never found. The police set up their own cameras, installed motion sensors, and posted an officer outside. Nothing happened for 3 nights. The 4th night, with no one watching, every tool in the barn arranged itself into a perfect outline of a child's body on the floor. The police photographs showed nothing but empty rooms. I hired a local kid to help me work. Charlie was about 17, built like a linebacker. Having him around helped, but the activity got worse. Tools would fly off shelves, and materials would move while we watched. Charlie quit after a wooden mallet nearly took off his head. It sailed past him as if thrown by an invisible hand. The police investigation stalled. No matches on DNA from the bones. No evidence linking them to the missing boy, and no evidence of who buried them or why. I considered selling the place, but who would buy it? Besides, something kept pulling me back to that barn. I had to know the truth. I started spending nights out there, sleeping on a cot in the corner. The activity continued. It felt less hostile. Tools still moved, but nothing flew through the air anymore. Sometimes I'd wake up to find my blanket tucked around me more securely. I talked out loud to the empty barn, told whatever was there that I meant no harm, that I wanted to restore the building and make it strong again, that maybe we could work together. The response came gradually. I'd find tools placed exactly where I needed them before I realized I needed them. Difficult joints would fit together perfectly, as if I had an invisible helper holding things in place. One morning, I found a message scratched in the dust on my workbench. Find the rest. I spent a week digging up the entire foundation. Nothing. Then I noticed tool marks on one of the main support posts. Different from the others. Newer. Jim Henderson's post from 1982. I cut it open with a chainsaw. Inside the hollow core, wrapped in plastic, I found the rest of the bones and a skull. The police came back. This time they had enough evidence to open a real investigation. Dental records confirmed that it was Tommy Chen, the boy who disappeared in 1982. Further investigation revealed that Jim Henderson had worked as a janitor at Tommy's school. Mrs. Henderson broke down when they questioned her again. She admitted finding Jim's journals after his death, detailed accounts of what he'd done. She burned them, wanting to protect his memory. Never knew about the bones. Jim Henderson died of a heart attack in that barn in 2008. They say he was reorganizing his tools when they found him. The activity in the barn stopped after we found the skull. My tools stay where I put them now. The only sounds at night are normal old building sounds, settling timbers, wind in the eaves. I still work on the barn most days. The restoration is coming along well. Sometimes I think I feel someone watching me work, but it's not threatening anymore. More like quality control. I keep one particular hammer separate from the others. It's an old one with a worn handle, polished smooth by decades of use. Every morning I find it lined up perfectly straight, ready for the day's work. I've thought about having someone come to bless the building or do whatever they do to clear out spirits, but I won't. This barn has its own history now, its own story. Some of it ugly, some of it strange. Tommy Chen's family finally had a proper funeral. They buried him in the cemetery 2 towns over. I went to the service, didn't tell them about the activity in the barn. Some things are better left unsaid. The barn is almost finished now. New foundation, new roof. Everything is plumb and square, built to last another 100 years. Sometimes at sunset, the light comes through the west windows just right, lighting up the interior like amber. The old timbers glow with a warmth that makes all the strange history feel distant. But I still lock my tools up every night, counting each one carefully, and every morning I check to see how they've been rearranged. Yesterday, I found them arranged in a message. Thank you. I answered out loud to the empty barn. You're welcome. Then I picked up that old hammer and went back to work. There's always more to do in an old barn. Always something that needs fixing. Always something that needs to be put right. The bones are at rest now, properly buried. The truth is known, but sometimes late at night, I hear the sounds of someone puttering around in there, setting things in order, and I sleep better knowing I'm not alone out here. Some people ask why I didn't run away when things got weird. I tell them the truth. In 30 years of restoration work, this is the first job where my tools clean themselves up. Besides, we all need a project in retirement. Mine just happens to come with a few extra helpers. Spring is coming soon. I'm planning to start on the interior finishing work. Yesterday, I bought a new set of chisels. This morning, I found them arranged by size on my workbench, polished to a mirror shine. I guess some things never change, and maybe that's not such a bad thing after all. I shouldn't have gone fishing that morning. Every time I close my eyes, I see that face staring back at me from the water. Not my reflection, something else. It's been 3 weeks, and I still can't sleep. I need to write this down to tell someone what happened. Maybe then I'll stop seeing those eyes. It was October 12th. I remember the exact date because it was my day off, and I'd been planning this solo fishing trip for weeks. My wife Sarah had been nagging me about spending too much time at work, saying I needed to decompress. She wasn't wrong. Running a construction company during a labor shortage had turned me into a ball of stress. I loaded up my truck at 4:30 a.m. The air was cold enough to make my nose run. I threw in my tackle box, rod cooler with some sandwiches and beer, and my lucky baseball cap. The ratty Red Sox one I've had since college. The drive to Lake Morrison took 40 minutes. I didn't pass a single car on the back roads. The lake sits in a hollow between two hills, surrounded by pine trees. There's this wooden dock on the east side that nobody uses anymore except for a few of us locals who know about it. The woods are rotting in places, but it stretches out about 30 feet into deeper water, perfect for catching bass at dawn. I parked in the gravel lot and grabbed my gear. The sky was just starting to lighten, that deep blue-gray before sunrise when everything looks like it's underwater. My boots crunched on frost-covered grass as I walked down to the dock. The lake was dead still, like black glass. The temperature was around 35 degrees. I could see my breath in the beam of my headlamp. The dock creaked under my weight as I walked out to the end. I set down my tackle box and cooler, then got my rod ready with a plastic worm, purple, because that's what usually works in low light. I clicked off my headlamp to let my eyes adjust. That's when things started getting weird. The water was so calm, it was like looking into a mirror, except for these little ripples that kept appearing. They weren't coming from wind or fish. They just happened like someone was gently touching the surface from underneath. I leaned over the edge to get a better look. The first rays of sun were just starting to hit the water, and there, in that pre-dawn light, I saw a face looking up at me. Not my face. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks. You know how sometimes your brain sees patterns that aren't there? But when I moved back, the face stayed exactly where it was. It didn't follow my movement like a reflection should. It was a man's face, maybe in his 40s with pale skin, dark hair, and sharp features. He was staring straight up at me with these intense blue eyes. Not floating, not swimming, just there, like a photograph suspended under the surface. I jerked back so fast I almost fell. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 5, and looked again. The face was still there, still staring. "Hey!" I shouted. My voice echoed across the lake. The face didn't move, didn't blink. I scrambled to get my phone from my pocket, thinking I needed to document this, but my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped it. It clattered on the dock. When I looked back at the water, the face had moved closer to the surface. Those eyes locked onto mine. They weren't just looking at me, they were studying me. Like a scientist examining a specimen. The surface of the water began to ripple around the face, but nothing else on the lake moved. I backed away, keeping my eyes on that spot. The face followed my movement, sliding through the water without creating a wake. It stayed exactly the same distance below the surface, tracking me like a shark. My heel hit my tackle box, and I almost tripped. Cold sweat was running down my back. The face was getting clearer now as the sun rose higher. I could see more details: crow's feet around the eyes, a small scar on the chin, individual strands of dark hair moving in water that shouldn't have been moving. Then it smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. The corners of the mouth went up too far, stretching the skin in a way that human faces don't stretch. The teeth were white and perfectly straight, like a denture commercial, but there were too many of them. I ran, left everything on the dock: rod, tackle box, cooler, phone. Just turned and sprinted up the path to my truck. The gravel shifted under my feet, and I fell once, scraping my palms raw. I could feel those eyes on my back the whole way. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, snatched them up with bloody hands. It took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the truck into reverse, then drive, fishtailing on the gravel as I accelerated. 5 minutes down the road, my heart still racing. I pulled over, had to throw up in the ditch. When I was done, I sat in my truck for a long time, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was having a stroke. Maybe someone had slipped something in my coffee at the diner yesterday, but I knew what I'd seen. I drove home, hands clenched so tight on the steering wheel that my knuckles were white. Sarah was still asleep when I got there. I took a scalding hot shower, scrubbed my hands until the scrapes stopped bleeding, then called in sick to work. Around noon, I drove back to the lake. I had to know if my stuff was still there, had to know if I was crazy. The dock was empty, no tackle box, no cooler, no rod, no phone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the wet footprints leading from the end of the dock up to where I'd parked my truck. They weren't my boot prints. They were barefoot and about 2 sizes bigger than my feet. I drove straight to the county sheriff's office and told them someone had stolen my fishing gear. I didn't mention the face or the footprints. They took a report, but I could tell they weren't going to do anything about it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, that wrong smile. Sarah asked what was wrong, and I told her I had food poisoning. The next day, I got a new phone and had to drive 40 minutes to the Apple Store in Burlington. While they were setting it up, I used their computer to search news articles about Lake Morrison. I found some stories about drownings over the years, mostly drunk teenagers, a couple of ice fishing accidents. Nothing unusual for a lake that size. But then I found something in a local paper from 1987. A man had disappeared while fishing alone. They found his truck in the parking lot, his gear on the dock. The article included a photo, a dark-haired man with sharp features and blue eyes. I closed the browser and left the store without waiting for my phone. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't been back to the lake. I haven't been fishing anywhere. I told Sarah I lost interest, sold what was left of my gear on Craigslist. But things keep happening. My coffee mug leaves wet rings on the counter when I know I used a coaster. Puddles appear in the hallway on dry days. The bathroom mirror fogs up when no one showered. And sometimes, when I'm washing my hands or brushing my teeth, I catch a glimpse of something in the sink, just for a second before the water drains. A face looking up at me, smiling that wrong smile. Last night, I woke up at 3 a.m. The bathroom faucet was running. Sarah was sound asleep beside me. I lay there in the dark, listening to the water, feeling those eyes watching me from every drain in the house. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know what happened. Need someone to believe me. The faucet in the kitchen just turned on by itself. I can hear water running. The sink is filling up. I can see a ripple forming in the water. Some things rising to the surface. I should run, but I'm not going to, because now I know why that face was smiling. It wasn't just looking at me that morning, it was choosing me. The water's almost to the top of the sink now. I can see dark hair starting to break the surface. Those blue eyes are opening underwater, and that mouth is stretching into that wrong smile, showing all those perfect teeth. I'm going to look. I have to look. Maybe this time I'll understand why it chose me. Maybe this time. The laughter hit me first. High-pitched and rhythmic, it cut through the gray November afternoon. I stopped walking, and Rex, my German shepherd, froze beside me. His ears perked up, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. The abandoned Westbrook Elementary School stood ahead, its broken windows staring at us like dead eyes. I'd walked this route with Rex hundreds of times in the past 5 years, ever since the school shut down after the district rezoning. But something was different today. The rusted chain-link fence had a fresh hole cut into it, and through the gap I saw the playground equipment moving. The swings swayed back and forth in perfect unison, all 6 of them rising and falling together like they were being pushed by invisible hands. More laughter echoed across the cracked asphalt, and my skin broke out in goosebumps. The sound wasn't quite right. It was too synchronized, too mechanical, like someone had recorded children laughing and was playing it on loop. Rex's growl grew louder, and the fur along his spine stood straight up. "Easy, boy," I said, but my voice came out shaky. I should have turned around, should have pulled Rex away and gone home to my empty apartment, heated up some leftover pizza, and watched the Patriots game. But I didn't. Instead, I moved closer to the fence, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and something else I couldn't name. The laughter got louder as I approached. Through the fence, I could make out more details of the playground. Dried leaves skittered across the ground in the light wind, but the swings kept their perfect rhythm up and down, up and down. The rusty chains should have been squeaking, but they moved in complete silence. I reached the hole in the fence. It was a clean cut with metal wires snipped with precision. Rex resisted when I tried to lead him through, planting his feet and whining. "Come on, boy, let's check it out." He followed reluctantly, pressing against my leg. I could feel him trembling. The playground felt different once we were inside the fence. The air was colder and the laughter seemed to come from everywhere at once. I looked around for speakers, thinking maybe some teenagers had set up some kind of prank, but I didn't see any. The school building loomed behind us. Its red brick walls were covered in graffiti and ivy. As we got closer to the swings, the laughter started to change. It grew deeper and slower, like a tape being played at the wrong speed. Rex stopped walking and started backing up, pulling hard on his leash. That's when I saw the figure sitting on the middle swing. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the fading afternoon light. But as I watched, it became more solid. A man dressed in a dark suit that looked decades out of date. He sat perfectly still on the swing, his feet planted on the ground. The other swings continued their synchronized movement around him. "Hey," I called out, "this is private property." The man didn't respond. He didn't move at all. The laughter had stopped, replaced by absolute silence. Even the wind seemed to have died. I took another step forward, and the man's head slowly turned toward me. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Where his face should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth, pale skin stretched over the shape of a head, with no features at all. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. It was like looking at an egg-shaped blank canvas. Rex barked, the sound explosive in the silence. The man's head snapped toward the noise with impossible speed, and he stood up. He was tall, much taller than I'd realized. His movements were wrong, too fluid, like he had extra joints in his limbs. I backed away, yanking on Rex's leash. The faceless man took a step toward us. His suit rippled in ways that didn't match his movement, like there was something underneath it that wasn't shaped like a human body. Then he spoke. The voice came from everywhere, not just from where he stood. It sounded like a dozen voices layered on top of each other, some high and childlike, others deep and guttural. "Will you push me on the swing?" I ran. Rex bolted ahead of me, nearly pulling my arm out of its socket. Behind us, the laughter started again, but now I could hear what it really was. Not children laughing, but that thing's voices, all of them laughing together in that horrible synchronized way. We sprinted through the hole in the fence. I heard footsteps behind us, moving too fast, getting closer. The sound of dress shoes on asphalt clicked, 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 like a tap dancer going at impossible speed. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct in my body screamed that if I turned around, if I saw that blank face again, something in my mind would break. The footsteps got closer. I could hear breathing now, but it wasn't normal breathing. It was like the sound of wind whistling through a cave, echoing and multiplying. Rex was pulling me forward so hard I could barely keep my feet under me. We reached the corner of Maple Street. The footsteps were right behind us now. I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck, like fingers made of ice. Then we passed under a streetlight, and the footsteps stopped. I ran another block before I dared to slow down. When I finally stopped, my lungs burning. I turned around. The street behind us was empty. In the distance, I could see the school building dark against the dying light. The swings hung motionless. Rex and I made it home in record time. I locked every door and window in my apartment, then sat on the couch with Rex pressed against me, both of us shaking. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blank face turning toward me. The next morning, I called the police to report the hole in the fence. The dispatcher sounded bored as she took down my information. When I tried to tell her about the faceless man, she cut me off, saying they'd send someone to check on the fence. I changed my dog walking route after that. I didn't want to go anywhere near Westbrook Elementary. But 3 days later, I saw a story in the local paper that made my blood run cold. 2 12-year-old boys had gone missing. They were last seen riding their bikes near the old school. I told myself it was a coincidence. Kids went missing sometimes. It didn't have to have anything to do with what I'd seen. Then I started noticing other things. The sound of laughter late at night drifting through my bedroom window. The swing set in the park near my apartment moving on its own in the early morning hours. Glimpses of a tall figure in an old-fashioned suit standing at the edge of my vision. Gone when I turned to look directly at it. A week after my encounter at the school, I was walking Rex in the evening, staying well away from Westbrook Elementary. We were passing by the small playground behind the public library when I heard it. That same rhythmic laughter growing louder. Rex started growling before I saw anything. When I looked at the playground, my heart nearly stopped. All the swings were moving in perfect sync, just like before. And there, sitting on the middle swing, was the faceless man. He turned his blank face toward me and stood up. This time I saw how he moved more clearly, his joints bent backward, his limbs too long and flexible. The suit rippled and shifted like there were things crawling underneath it. "Will you push me on the swing?" The voices asked, children and adults and something else all speaking together. I ran again, but this time I knew it wouldn't be enough. This time he was going to catch me and I would find out what happened to those missing boys. The footsteps followed, getting closer and closer. The cold fingers brushed my neck again. I could hear the breathing like wind through 1,000 caves right behind me. Then a car turned onto the street, its headlights sweeping across us. The footsteps stopped. When I looked back, the faceless man was gone. That night, I started packing. I couldn't stay in this town anymore. Every playground, every swing set had become a potential encounter with that thing. I didn't know what it was or what it wanted, but I knew it wasn't going to stop. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I heard laughter outside my window. Children's voices were perfectly synchronized. I didn't look out. I didn't need to. I knew what I would see. Rex started barking frantically. The temperature in my apartment dropped so fast I could see my breath. The laughter got louder, closer, coming from right outside my bedroom door. I grabbed my car keys and Rex's leash. We were going to make a run for the parking lot. If we could just get to the car. The bedroom door swung open. The faceless man stood in the doorway. His blank face turned toward me. His suit rippled and bulged, things moving underneath the fabric. He took a step forward, his leg bending at an impossible angle. "Will you push me on the swing?" The voices were different now. I recognized some of them. They were the voices of the missing boys. I threw my bedside lamp at him and ran for the window. Rex was right behind me as I scrambled onto the fire escape. We clattered down the metal stairs, the sound of that horrible layered laughter following us. I reached the bottom and sprinted for my car. The faceless man appeared at the entrance of the alley, moving with that terrible fluid grace. He was between us and the car. Then Rex did something he'll never forget. My brave, loyal dog turned and charged straight at the faceless man, barking and snarling. The thing hesitated, its blank face turning toward Rex. That moment of distraction was all I needed. I ran past him, grabbed Rex's collar as I went by and dragged him with me to the car. We jumped in, and I started the engine with shaking hands. The faceless man appeared in front of the car. In the headlights, I could see that his suit was moving more violently now, shapes pressing against the fabric from inside. His blank face began to split open, revealing something dark and writhing underneath. I floored the accelerator. The car hit him, but it felt wrong, like driving through a cloud of ice-cold smoke. For a moment, the windshield was covered in something dark that moved and twisted. Then it was gone, and we were speeding down the street. I drove all night, putting as much distance as possible between us and that town. Rex slept in the passenger seat, occasionally whimpering in his dreams. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see a tall figure in an old suit standing in the middle of the road behind us. We ended up in Arizona. It's been 6 months, and I haven't seen the faceless man since that night. But sometimes, when I'm walking Rex past a playground, I'll hear the sound of swings moving in perfect sync. Sometimes late at night I hear laughter, children's voices, all speaking together in perfect unison. I don't walk Rex near playgrounds anymore, and I never go near swing sets anymore. The local paper back home ran a follow-up story about the missing boys. They were never found. The police said they probably ran away, but I know better. I know they're still there. Their voice is part of that horrible chorus, asking people to push them on the swings. Last week I got a letter in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with words typed in an old-fashioned font. I'm still waiting for my turn on the swing. I burned the letter and started packing again. Rex and I leave tomorrow. I don't know where we're going, but it has to be somewhere without playgrounds, somewhere without swing sets, somewhere he can find us. But deep down, I know it doesn't matter how far we run, because every town has a playground, and every park has swings. And somewhere out there, a man without a face is waiting patiently for his turn, waiting for someone to push him on the swing. Every morning at 7:15 a.m., for the past 3 months, the old man waved at me from apartment 4B. Today I learned that no one has lived there since 2019. I remember the first time I saw him. It was a cold January morning, and I was running late for work. As I rushed out of my building, movement caught my eye from the apartment complex across the street. An elderly man stood at the window, his wrinkled hand raised in a friendly wave. He wore a brown cardigan and had white hair neatly combed to one side. I waved back, hurrying to my car. The next day, he was there again. Same window, same brown cardigan, same gentle wave. I checked my watch. It was exactly 7:15 a.m. This time I got a better look at his face. Thin lips curved into a slight smile and deep-set eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone's kindly grandfather. It became our daily routine. Every morning at 7:15, I'd exit my building, and there he'd be waving from his window on the 4th floor. Sometimes I'd wave quickly, focused on getting to work. Other times I'd smile and nod, taking an extra second to acknowledge him. I never saw him outside the building, or at any other time of day. Just that morning wave, like clockwork. The routine continued through January and February. I started timing my departure around his appearance. If I left too early or too late, I'd miss him. When daylight saving time hit in March, he adjusted his schedule too. Still there at 7:15 every single morning. I asked my girlfriend Sarah about it one evening as we ate takeout in my living room. You know that older guy in 4B across the street? The one who waves every morning. She looked up from her pad thai. Which building is that? The red brick one. Hampton Arms Apartments. I pointed out my window to the building across the way. 4th floor, 3rd window from the left. Sarah squinted at the building. I've never noticed anyone there. He's always there at 7:15, wearing the same brown cardigan and waving to me for months now. She shrugged. Probably just lonely. Lots of elderly people living alone these days. I nodded, but something about her response bothered me. The way she dismissed it so quickly. I walked to my window and looked at 4B. The lights were off, the curtains drawn. They're always drawn except during that morning wave. The next day, I decided to wave first. At exactly 7:15, I stepped out of my building and immediately looked up at his window. He was there, hand already raised, but this time I noticed something odd. The window looked dirty, like it hadn't been cleaned in years, and the curtains behind him seemed faded, almost yellow with age. I stood there longer than usual, studying his appearance. His brown cardigan never changed. His white hair was always combed the same way. His hand raised in the exact same position every single time. A car horn jolted me out of my thoughts. I was blocking someone's driveway. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the window, about the unchanging routine, about how I'd never seen him any other time of day. I pulled up the Hampton Arms website on my phone and found their office number. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. Hampton Arms Leasing Office. This is Monica speaking. Hi, I live across the street and had a question about one of your residents. The elderly gentleman in 4B. A pause. 4B has been vacant since December 2019. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I see someone there every morning. Older man, white hair, brown cardigan. He waves to me at 7:15. Sir, I assure you that unit has been empty for over 4 years. The last tenant passed away and we've been renovating it on and off since then. No one lives there. Could you check your records again? Maybe you're thinking of a different unit. One moment. I heard keyboard clicks. No, I'm certain. 4B has been vacant since Mr. Peterson passed away in December 2019. We're actually showing it to a potential tenant tomorrow morning. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. I walked to my window and stared at 4B. The lights were off, curtains drawn just like always. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, my mind racing. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I seeing things? The property manager seemed so certain. At 7:14 the next morning, I stood in my doorway, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to stay inside. Part of me had to know. 7:15 a.m. I stepped outside. He was there with white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a brown cardigan. His hand raised in that familiar wave. I didn't wave back. Instead, I crossed the street, walking straight toward the Hampton Arms entrance. My eyes stayed fixed on window 4B. He continued waving. That slight smile remained unchanged. The lobby was empty except for a sleepy-looking security guard. I showed him my driver's license and signed in as a visitor. The elevator creaked as it carried me to the 4th floor. The hallway carpet was worn, showing trails where countless feet had walked. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. 4A, 4B. I stopped in front of the door. A vacant unit sign hung from the handle. The deadbolt was clearly visible through a small window in the door. No one had entered this apartment in a long time. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. My watch showed 7:18 a.m. He would still be at the window. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. Hey, can you do me a favor? I said. I'm across the street at Hampton Arms. Can you look at 4B and tell me what you see? Now, I'm getting ready for work. Please just look out your window and tell me what you see in 4B. A sigh. Fine. Hold on. A pause. The curtains are drawn. Lights off. I don't see anything. My throat went dry. No one in the window. No elderly man waving. No. Just dirty windows and old curtains. Are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. Thanks. I hung up. The property manager, Monica, rounded the corner carrying a folder. She stopped when she saw me. Can I help you? I pointed to 4B. I'm the one who called about this unit last night. She frowned. Sir, you shouldn't be up here without an appointment. I know. I'm sorry, but I needed to see for myself. Could you show me inside? Please? Monica hesitated, then pulled out her keys. 5 minutes. I have a showing scheduled soon anyway. The door creaked open. Stale air hit my face. Dust particles floated in the beam of sunlight from the window. The apartment was completely empty. I walked to the window, the same one I'd seen him in every morning. A thick layer of dust covered the sill. The curtains were yellow with age, falling apart in places. When did you say the last tenant died? Monica checked her folder. December 15. Mr. Peterson. Heart attack. Poor thing. Found him right by this window, actually. My legs felt weak. I gripped the dusty windowsill to steady myself. What did he look like? She pulled out an old lease application and showed me the attached photo. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, brown cardigan. I stared out the window at my building across the street. From here, I could see my front door clearly. The exact spot where I stood every morning at 7:15. Did he have any particular habits? Daily routines? Monica thought for a moment. You know, the other tenants used to mention that he'd stand at this window every morning and wave to people. He said he never missed a day, rain or shine. Started after his wife died. He said it made him feel less lonely. I checked my watch. It was 7:30 a.m. The waving would have stopped by now. Thank you for showing me the unit. My voice sounded distant, strange. Back in my apartment, I sat by my window and stared at 4B. The curtains remained drawn. The windows stayed dirty. No movement, no waving, no elderly man in a brown cardigan. The next morning I left for work at 7 a.m. I didn't look up at the window. I haven't looked up since. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I think about Mr. Peterson, about how he stood at that window every morning, waving to strangers, fighting off loneliness, about how even death couldn't break his routine. And I wonder, in all those months of waving back, was I just going through the motions like he was? Two people engaging in a meaningless ritual, one of us already long gone. These days I take a different route to work, but occasionally when I pass the Hampton Arms building, I catch myself glancing up at 4B. The window remains empty. The curtains drawn. I've heard the unit is still vacant. The property manager can seem to keep tenants there. They all complain about the same thing. Every morning at 7:15 they feel like someone's watching them. Some say they see movement in their peripheral vision. A hand raised in greeting. I could tell them what they're seeing. I could explain about Mr. Peterson and his morning routine, but I don't. Let them wave back if they want to. Sometimes a simple human connection is worth preserving, even if one of the humans isn't there anymore. Last week, Sarah asked why I changed my route to work. I told her it was because of traffic. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. How could I explain that? I'm afraid of looking up one morning and not seeing him there? That after all these months, his absence might be harder to accept than impossible presence. So I drive the long way to work now. I leave at different times. I avoid looking at windows. And every morning at 7:15, wherever I am, I feel an urge to raise my hand and wave. I resist it, but barely. Because I know that in apartment 4B, behind those dusty windows and faded curtains, Mr. Peterson is still there. Still wearing his brown cardigan. Still raised his hand in greeting. Still waiting for someone to wave back. Some routines, it seems, are stronger than death. Some connections persist beyond all reason or explanation. And sometimes, the simplest gesture, a wave between strangers, can echo long after one of those strangers is gone. I don't know if I'll ever understand what happened in those months of waving to Mr. Peterson. I don't know if it was grief or loneliness or something else entirely that kept him at that window. But I do know this. Every morning at 7:15 in an empty apartment across the street, an old man in a brown cardigan raises his hand to greet the world. And somewhere out there, someone is probably waving back. I shouldn't have gone camping alone. That's what everyone told me afterward, and they were right. But I needed to clear my head after my divorce. and I'd been camping in those mountains since I was a kid. What happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about being alone in the wilderness. This is my attempt to write down exactly what occurred, just the facts, because I still have trouble believing it myself. The Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest was quiet on that Thursday afternoon when I pulled my truck into the remote trailhead parking lot. No other vehicles around, which wasn't surprising for a weekday in late September. I shouldered my pack and started the 3-mile hike to my usual spot near Crystal Lake. The air felt crisp, and dead leaves crunched under my boots. I'd packed light, just my one-person tent, sleeping bag, camping stove, some freeze-dried meals, and basic supplies. My LED lantern and headlamp had fresh batteries. The weight of my hunting knife on my belt felt reassuring, though I never needed it for anything more threatening than opening food packages. The sun was still a few hours from setting when I reached my campsite. It sat in a small clearing about 50 yards from the lake, backed by a thick stand of Douglas fir trees. I'd stayed there maybe a dozen times before. The familiar fire pit still had some old ashes, and someone had left a neat pile of firewood under a tarp. Setting up camp took less than an hour. I got the tent squared away, rolled out my sleeping bag, and arranged my gear. The temperature was dropping as evening approached, so I pulled on my fleece jacket and got a fire going. While my freeze-dried beef stew rehydrated, I sat in my folding camp chair and watched the sunset paint the lake orange and purple. That's when I noticed the silence. Usually the forest had a steady background noise. Birds, small animals, wind in the trees. But as darkness crept in, everything went quiet. No crickets, no owls, not even the sound of fish jumping in the lake. Just the soft pop and crackle of my campfire. I told myself it was just the weather changing. Maybe a storm was coming in, though the sky looked clear. I've been camping enough to know that sometimes the woods just got quiet. No big deal. After eating, I cleaned up and secured my food in a bear canister 50 yards from camp. The stars were out now, incredibly bright away from city lights. I sat by the fire for another hour, watching the flames and enjoying the solitude. The silence continued, broken only by the fire and the occasional creak of tree branches. Around 10 p.m. I decided to turn in. I extinguished the fire properly, scattered the ashes, and did a final check of my camp. The night had gotten cold enough to see my breath. I clicked on my LED lantern and ducked into my tent. That's when it started. I was just getting settled in my sleeping bag when I heard it. A soft scratching sound from somewhere outside the tent, like something small moving through the leaves. I sat up and listened. Hard. The sound stopped. Probably just a mouse, I said out loud. More to break the silence than anything else. I switched off my lantern to sleep. The moment the light went out, the feeling hit me. Something was watching me. I know how that sounds. I'm not talking about some vague, creepy sensation. This was a physical certainty, like a pressure on my skin. Multiple sets of eyes focused on my tent. I snapped the lantern back on. The feeling vanished instantly. My heart was pounding now. I unzipped the tent flap and stuck my head out, sweeping the lantern beam around the campsite. Nothing moved in the harsh white light. The trees stood silent. No glowing eyes reflected back at me. I zipped the tent back up, trying to laugh it off. Just my imagination working overtime, being alone in the woods. I'd camped solo plenty, but times before, no big deal. I left the lantern on and tried to sleep. After about 20 minutes, the battery started to die. The light dimmed gradually, and as it did, I felt it again. That sensation of being watched, growing stronger as the darkness crept in. My hand shook as I pulled my backup headlamp from my pack. The moment I switched it on, the feeling disappeared. Whatever was out there retreated from the light. A rational voice in my head said to pack up and hike out. But it was nearly midnight, and hiking these trails in the dark was asking for a broken ankle. Better to wait for daylight. So began the longest night of my life. I couldn't keep the lights on forever. The batteries wouldn't last. Each time one light source started to die, I had to switch to another before the watching sensation became unbearable. I cycled through my lantern, headlamp, and finally my phone's flashlight. Around 2 a.m., I heard the scratching sounds again. Closer now. Multiple sources moving through the leaves around my tent. When I shined my light at the tent walls, I could see small shadows moving outside. The shapes were wrong somehow, too tall to be mice or rabbits, but too small to be anything else I could think of. I gripped my hunting knife. though I knew it was useless against whatever was out there. The shadows kept moving, circling my tent. Sometimes they would stop and I could see their silhouettes through the tent fabric, small, upright figures, no more than 2 feet tall. My phone battery hit 20%. The flashlight wouldn't last much longer. I had my car keys with their tiny LED light, but that would be it. My hands were sweating despite the cold. The scratching got louder, more frequent. The small figures moved faster now, their shadows dancing across the tent walls. I heard something else too, a sound like whispering, but in no language I'd ever heard. High-pitched, rapid clicking sounds that might have been speech. At 3:47 a.m., my phone died. The darkness hit like a physical weight. The watching sensation became overwhelming. Dozens of eyes fixed on me from all sides. The whispering grew louder. The shadows pressed against the tent walls. I fumbled with my car keys, finally managing to click on the tiny LED. The weak blue light created more shadows than it dispelled, but the watching sensation eased slightly. Something touched the tent near my head, the small hand pressing against the fabric. I could see the fingers spread out, making 5 tiny impressions. Then another hand appeared beside it, and another. More hands pressed against the tent walls, dozens of them, leaving small indentations in the nylon. The key light flickered. I screamed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I screamed and slashed at the tent wall with my knife cutting through the nylon. The hands pulled back. I heard rapid movement through the leaves. That weird clicking speech getting more excited. The key light went out. What happened next is hard to describe. The darkness was absolute. The watching sensation became a physical pressure like being at the bottom of the ocean. Small hands touched my sleeping bag. My arms, my face. Too many hands to count, moving too fast to track. The clicking speech surrounded me, growing to a fever pitch. I thrashed and swung my knife blindly, but the hands were everywhere. They weren't trying to hurt me. They seemed to be examining me like curious children discovering something new. But there were so many of them, and in the pitch darkness, I couldn't tell what they were attached to. I curled into a ball, covering my face with my arms. The small hands kept touching, prodding, pulling at my clothes and hair. I could smell them now, a musty, earthy scent like old leaves and wet soil. The clicking speech changed tone. It seemed almost disappointed. The hands withdrew. I heard movement outside the tent, the sound of many small feet moving through leaves. Then silence. I lay there shaking, too terrified to move. Minutes passed. The pressure of being watched gradually faded. In the east, the sky began to lighten. I've never been so grateful to see dawn. As soon as there was enough light to see, I unzipped what was left of my tent and practically fell. Outside, the campsite looked normal at first glance. My fire pit was cold. The trees stood, quiet in the morning lights. But then I saw the ground. Footprints, hundreds of them, all around my tent. Small, bare footprints pressed into the soft earth, each one no longer than my palm. 5 toes, clearly defined. They surrounded my tent in concentric circles, some overlapping others, creating a pattern that made my head hurt to look at. I didn't bother packing up properly. I stuffed my sleeping bag and essential gear into my backpack, leaving the ruined tent behind. The footprints continued to the edge of the clearing before disappearing into the underbrush. The hike back to my truck was the fastest I've ever made it. The forest had come alive again with normal morning sounds. Birds singing, squirrels chattering. Everything seemed ordinary in daylight, but I could still feel phantom touches from those small hands. I drove straight to the ranger station and reported what happened. The ranger listened patiently, making notes. He didn't seem surprised. "You're the 3rd one this season," he said finally. "Always the same story. Solo campers, always at night, always the footprints in the morning." "What are they?" I asked. He shook his head. "We don't go up there after dark anymore. Some things in these woods are better left alone." That was 2 weeks ago. I'd been trying to write this down to make sense of it. The cuts on my arms from my own knife have healed. The ranger says my tent is still there if I want to go back for it. I don't. But sometimes at night, when I turn off the lights in my apartment, I feel that familiar sensation. Like something small is watching me from the darkness, waiting to see what I'll do. I leave the lights on now. I know how this story sounds. I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived it. But if you're planning to go camping in those mountains, take my advice. Don't go alone. And whatever you do, don't turn off the lights. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I saved the quarterly report one final time at 11:47 p.m. I was the last person on the 23rd floor of the Morgan building. Probably the last in the whole damn place, except for Jerry, the night guard down in the lobby. I shut down my computer and gathered my things. My shoulders stiffened from hunching over the keyboard for the past 14 hours. The cleaning crew had already come and gone. Their vacuum tracks still showed in the gray carpet, and the smell of industrial cleaner hung in the air. My footsteps echoed through the empty office as I walked past the dark cubicles toward the elevator bank. The motion sensor lights flicked on one by one as I moved, creating a tunnel of fluorescent light with darkness on either side. I pressed the down button and loosened my tie while I waited. The digital display above showed the elevator was coming up from the lobby. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since the sad vending machine sandwich at 3 p.m. I was already thinking about the leftover pizza in my fridge at home when the elevator dinged and the doors slid open. Empty. The mirrored walls reflected my tired face back at me from multiple angles as I stepped inside. I hit the lobby button and leaned against the back wall, closing my eyes for a moment as the doors closed with a soft whoosh. The familiar dropping sensation in my gut told me we were moving down. The whisper had been so faint that I almost thought I'd imagined it. But no, there it was again. Michael. Woman's voice, barely more than a breath. It seemed to come from the corner of the elevator, but when I looked, there was nothing there except my own reflection. My heart started pounding against my ribs. Hello. My voice came out hoarse. I cleared my throat and tried again. Is someone there? No response. Just the quiet hum of the elevator moving downward. The floor numbers ticked by on the digital display, 20, 19, 18. My palms were sweating now. I wiped them on my pants and told myself I was being ridiculous. Long day, tired mind playing tricks. That's all it was. The elevator slowed and stopped at the 15th floor. I hadn't pressed that button. The doors slid open, with a cheerful ding that seemed obscene in the tense silence. The 15th floor stretched out before me, dark except for a few scattered emergency exit signs casting a sickly green glow. Row after row of cubicles made shadowy canyons in the darkness. No movement. No sound. Not even the usual hum of computers or air conditioning. Going down, that whispered voice asked and laughed, a sound like dry leaves scraping across concrete. My finger jabbed the door close button repeatedly, but nothing happened. The doors remained stubbornly open. The air felt thick and cold, like breathing through a wet blanket. My chest tightened. I could see my breath fogging in front of my face now. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees in the span of seconds. The emergency exit signs flickered once, twice, then went dark. Total darkness pressed against my eyeballs. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. My fingers were clumsy with fear. The screen lit up, casting a pale blue glow that barely penetrated the blackness beyond the elevator doors. "Join us, Michael," the whisper came from directly behind me, now. I spun around, my heart thundering. Nothing was there but my own wild-eyed reflection in the mirrored wall. But in the phone's dim light, I could see something wrong with the reflection. It moved a split second too slow, like a video feed with slight lag. And was that a shadow behind my shoulder? A darker shape that wasn't me. The doors finally mercifully began to close. But as they did, I heard footsteps in the darkness of the 15th floor. Slow, deliberate steps moving toward the elevator. The sound of dress shoes on carpet getting closer. No, I muttered, pressing myself into the corner furthest from the doors. The footsteps were almost there now. In the narrowing gap between the doors, I caught a glimpse of something pale emerging from the darkness, a hand reaching for the doors. The doors slammed shut. The elevator lurched downward so suddenly that I stumbled and nearly fell. The digital display was going crazy, numbers flashing randomly. The elevator picked up speed, moving faster than it should be able to. My stomach rose into my throat. That laugh again, closer now. Going down, down, down. The mirrored walls were rippling like water. My reflection fractured and multiplied, a dozen distorted versions of my terrified face. And behind each one, shadows moved and shifted, taking on almost human shapes before dissolving again. The elevator was in freefall now. The floor numbers were just a blur. The metal box shuddered and groaned around me. A high-pitched keening filled the air, the cable straining, about to snap. I crouched in the corner, arms over my head, waiting for the impact. The voice was everywhere now, not just a whisper, but a chorus of whispers growing louder. Michael, Michael, Michael. The elevator gave one final violent shake. Then everything stopped. Silence. I slowly lowered my arms. The elevator was perfectly still. The digital display showed L for lobby. The doors opened with the same cheerful ding as always. Jerry, the security guard, looked up from his crossword puzzle as I stumbled out. Working late again, Mr. Ross? I stared at him, then back at the elevator. It looked completely normal. The mirrored walls reflected the lobby's fluorescent lights. No shadows, no whispers, no sign of anything unusual. You okay there? Jerry asked. You were looking a bit pale. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. My voice sounded strange in my ears. Good night, Jerry. I hurried across the lobby, my dress shoes clicking on the marble floor. The night air hit my face as I pushed through the revolving door and I gulped it down in deep breaths. My hands were still shaking as I dug out my car keys from my pocket. The parking garage was deserted at this hour. My footsteps echoed off the concrete as I walked to my car. Every shadow made me flinch and every small sound had me spinning around, heart racing. I finally reached my car and fumbled with the key fob. The lights flashed as it unlocked. I yanked the door open and practically dove inside, slamming it behind me and hitting the lock button immediately. Safe. I was safe now. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to slow my breathing. It wasn't real. Couldn't have been real. I was tired, stressed, working too hard. My mind had played tricks on me. That's all. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. The text message. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I opened the message. Going up tomorrow, Michael. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat, like it had burned me. Started the car with shaking hands and peeled out of the parking spot, tires squealing. I drove home well above the speed limit, checking the rearview mirror constantly. The messages kept coming. My phone buzzed every few minutes, but I refused to look at it. The sound filled the car like the beating of a heart. I made it home in record time and ran from the car to my apartment building. Took the stairs instead of the elevator, all 5 flights. By the time I reached my door, I was drenched in sweat and gasping for air. Inside, I locked the door, all 3 locks, checked them twice. Then I went through the entire apartment, turning on every light, opening every closet, looking under the bed. Nothing out of place, nothing unusual. My phone buzzed again from my pocket. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out. There were 17 unread messages, all from the same unknown number. I opened them one by one. Miss Us, the 15th floor is lonely. Come back and play. We're waiting. Going up. Going down. Choose a floor, Michael. Any floor. We're on every floor. You can take the stairs forever. Tomorrow. And the next day. And the next. And the next. We have all the time in the world. See you soon. The last message was just a series of floor numbers. 15-8. I dropped the phone like it was a live snake. It hit the carpet with a soft thud, screen glowing in the darkness. As I watched, one final message appeared. Sweet dreams, Michael. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat in my living room with all the lights on, jumping at every small sound. The digital clock on my cable box marked a slow crawl of hours. 4:47, 2:23, 3:15. Around 4 a.m., my phone screen lit up again. I nearly had a heart attack before I realized it was just my regular morning alarm time to get ready for work. I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I opened my email and typed out a message to my boss. Not feeling well, taking a sick day. Well, work from home. I hit send before I could change my mind. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found the number for HR. I couldn't take the elevator. Not today. Not ever again. I needed an office on a lower floor, 1st or 2nd floor, somewhere I could take the stairs. I tell them I had a medical condition, a heart problem, whatever it took. Because I knew with absolute certainty that if I ever stepped into that elevator again, I wouldn't make it out. The thing in there, whatever it was, would be waiting. And next time the doors might not open at the lobby. Next time they might not open at all. My phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. Smart choice, Michael, but you can't avoid us forever. Sooner or later, you'll need to go up. And we'll be here, waiting, always waiting. I blocked the number, but even as I did, I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd find another way to reach me. They had all the time in the world, after all. And somewhere in the Morgan building, on every floor, from the lobby to the roof, the elevators were moving up and down, carrying their invisible passengers. Waiting for the next person to step inside. Waiting for me. Going up, going down. Choose a floor. Any floor. Or waiting. The handprint appeared at 11:47 p.m. on Interstate 80, somewhere between Des Moines and Chicago. I know the exact time because I checked my watch right after I saw it. I wish I hadn't been alone on that road. I wish I had taken the morning flight instead of driving through the night. But mostly, I wish I had never stopped to clean that first handprint off my window. I'd been driving for 6 hours straight, taking the long haul back from a business meeting in Nebraska. The fog had rolled in about an hour earlier, thick and low to the ground. The kind that makes the white lines on the road disappear right in front of you. My headlights just bounced back at me, creating a wall of white that seemed to move with the car. The radio had gone quiet 20 minutes before, nothing but static on every station. I turned it off and was listening to the hum of my tires on the asphalt when I first noticed something wrong with my passenger window. At first I thought it was just condensation from the fog, but then I saw the clear outline of fingers. A handprint, perfect and clear, pressed against the outside of my passenger window, like someone had slapped their palm against the glass while I was driving. But I was doing 70 miles per hour, and there was nothing but empty highway around me. I hit the brakes harder than I should have. My Toyota Camry skidded slightly before coming to a stop on the shoulder. The fog swirled around the car in the red glow of my brake lights. I kept the engine running and the headlights on. "This is crazy," I said out loud, just to hear a voice. The sound echoed in the quiet car. I reached across to the passenger side and switched on the dome light. The handprint stood out even clearer now. It was larger than my own hand, the fingers long and thin. There was something off about the thumb. It bent at an odd angle. I pulled a pack of tissues from the center console and leaned over. The window felt ice cold under my hand as I wiped at the print. It came off easily, like wiping away steam. I sat back in my seat, crumpling the tissue. That's when I heard it, a soft squeak, like wet rubber on glass. I turned my head slowly toward the passenger window. The handprint was back. Exact same spot, exact same size, same twisted thumb. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed another tissue and wiped it away again. This time faster. My hands shook. I kept my eyes fixed on the spot where it had been. It reappeared before I could even drop the tissue. This time I saw it form like frost spreading across glass, but in reverse. Each finger materialized in a fraction of a second. I jammed my foot on the gas pedal. The tire spun for a moment before catching, and I shot back onto the highway. The speedometer climbed past 80, then 90. The fog whipped past my headlights. Another squeak. The handprint was back. I turned on all the interior lights and cranked the heat to full blast. Maybe it was just condensation, some weird atmospheric thing. The fog playing tricks with the temperature difference between inside and outside the car. The next squeak came from the back passenger window. A second handprint appeared there, identical to the first. And another appeared on the back driver's side. Another squeak. And the driver's window had one too. 4 handprints now, one on each window, like my car was being held by giant hands. I was going over 100 miles per hour. The fog was so thick I could barely see the road. I didn't care. The squeaking started coming faster. New handprints appeared on top of the old ones, overlapping until the windows were covered in dozens of prints. They started appearing on the windshields too, materializing faster than my wipers could clear them. I couldn't see the road anymore. Just handprints. Hundreds of them now, appearing with that wet squeaking sound that filled the car. The prints were appearing on the inside of the windows too. My exit was coming up in 2 miles. I knew because I'd driven this route dozens of times, but I couldn't see the signs through the handprints. I had to slow down. If I missed the exit, it would be another 30 miles to the next one. I eased off the gas to 70, then 50. The squeaking got louder. The handprints were appearing faster now, layering over each other. Some of them were sliding down the glass, leaving long streaks. 1 mile to my exit. I could barely see anything through the windshield. The wipers were useless now. They just smeared the prints around, making it worse. The temperature in the car dropped. My breath came out in clouds, despite the heater running full blast. The handprints on the inside of the windows felt like they were closing in. I could see each detail of them clearly now. The lines in the palms, the wrinkles at the knuckles, that twisted thumb that bent at an impossible angle. Half a mile. I needed to get off this highway. The prints were everywhere now, even starting to appear on my rearview mirror. The squeaking had become a constant sound, like someone running wet hands over glass again and again and again. I saw a blur of green through a small clear spot in the windshield, the exit sign. I turned hard, probably too hard. The car swayed, the tires howled, but I made it onto the exit ramp. The handprints stopped appearing. I kept driving, taking the familiar turns toward home on autopilot. My hands were clenched so tight on the steering wheel that my fingers had gone numb. The existing prints stayed on the windows, but no new ones appeared. My house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. I sat there with the engine running, staring at my front door through the maze of handprints. The fog had followed me here, curling around my yard like it was searching for something. I grabbed my phone and called my wife. She was visiting her sister in Florida. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just got home from Nebraska. The drive was fine. Call me when you can." I had to get out of the car. I couldn't sit there all night, but the prints on the inside of the windows felt like they were watching me. That twisted thumb seemed to point at me no matter which way I turned my head. I pulled my keys from the ignition. The dome light went out, leaving me in darkness, broken only by the glow of my phone screen. 12:27 a.m. now. 26 minutes since that first handprint appeared. A squeak came from the sunroof above my head. I looked up. Through the glass, I saw something more than a handprint. A face pressed against the sunroof, looking down at me. The face was made of fog or smoke or something else that shifted and swirled. But the eyes were solid, dark, fixed on mine. The face had no mouth, but somehow I heard it speak. The words came from everywhere and nowhere, like they were being pushed directly into my mind. "You're home." The voice was wet, like someone talking underwater. "We've been waiting so long for you to come home." More faces appeared at every window, pressing against the handprints. Dozens of them, all with those same dark eyes. All watching me. I fumbled with the door handle, but it wouldn't open. I hit the unlock button on my keys, and nothing happened. The power locks clicked rapidly, locking and unlocking themselves over and over. The temperature dropped lower. Ice crystals formed on the windows around the handprints. My breath came out in thick clouds now. The faces pressed harder against the glass. Their features became clearer. They all had that same twisted thumb. "We've been following you for so long," the voices said in unison. "Ever since that night, the night you drove away and left us there, left us in the fog, left us to die." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. My voice shook. "I've never seen you before. 3 years ago," they said, "the fog was thick, like tonight. You were driving too fast. You didn't see us crossing the road. You didn't stop, you just drove away." Memory hit me like a physical blow. A night like this one, a shape in the fog, a thud. Me, panicking, driving away, convincing myself I'd hit a deer. Reading about the missing hikers in the newspaper the next day. 5 of them lost in the fog. Never found. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know. I was scared." "We know," they said. "We've always known. We just wanted you to know too, to remember." The faces began to fade, and the handprints with them. The temperature in the car rose slowly back to normal. "Wait," I said. "What are you going to do to me?" "Nothing," they said, their voices growing fainter. "We just wanted you to live with it like we had to die with it. Every fog will bring us now. Every window will hold our hands. Every mirror will show our faces. You'll never forget again." The last handprint faded from my window. The fog outside thinned, then disappeared. My power lock stopped clicking. The door handle worked again. I sat there until sunrise, watching the windows, waiting. The faces didn't return that night, but they were right. You'll never forget again. Sometimes on foggy nights, I still see handprints forming on my windows. I don't wipe them away anymore. I just wait for them to fade and remember the lives I took with my cowardice. The faces watch me from every reflective surface. Their dark eyes follow me, their twisted thumbs pointing, always pointing. I've thought about turning myself in, but who would believe me? What evidence is there after 3 years? Besides, This is a better punishment, living with it. So I drive carefully now, especially in the fog. And when I see those handprints start to form, I pull over and wait. Sometimes they just appear and fade. Sometimes the faces press against my windows and whisper to me about the night they died, about the cold, about the waiting. I owe them that much to listen, to remember, to live with what I did. The fog is rolling in tonight. I can see it from my window. Soon the handprints will start appearing. Soon the faces will come. And I'll sit here and watch and remember. Because that's my punishment. That's my penance. That's my fog-bound prison marked out in handprints with twisted thumbs. And somewhere out there, in the spaces between streetlights, 5 figures walk through the fog, waiting, watching, their hands pressed against windows, their faces in the glass, forever reminding me of the night I chose to drive away, the night the fog took them, the night they chose to keep me. The first light went out as I passed beneath it. I didn't think much of it at first. Streetlights burn out all the time, but then the second one flickered and died too, and the third. By the fourth darkened lamppost, my heart was pounding against my ribs. I'd stayed late at work again, finishing up the Peterson account. The clock had read 11:47 p.m. when I finally shut down my computer and grabbed my coat. The night shift security guard, Bill, had barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as I pushed through the lobby doors into the cold October air. The walk home usually took 20 minutes. I'd done it hundreds of times before, following the same route down Madison Avenue and cutting through Palmer Park to reach my neighborhood. The park wasn't the safest place at night, but it saved me 10 minutes, and I'd never had any trouble. Tonight was different. The first streetlight had gone dark just as I reached the corner of Madison and 8th. The bulb had flickered twice, buzzed, and then snuffed out like someone had flipped a switch. I glanced up at it, shrugged, and kept walking. Old infrastructure, I figured. But then it happened again at the next light, and the next. Each time I got within about 15 feet of a lamppost, the bulb would sputter and die. The darkness followed me down the street like a wave, leaving pools of black in my wake. My pace quickened. Sweat beaded on my forehead, despite the autumn chill. I pulled my phone from my pocket, nearly dropping it as my trembling fingers fumbled with the screen. The brightness was turned all the way up, but the pale blue glow barely reached the ground at my feet. The entrance to Palmer Park loomed ahead. The wrought iron gates stood open as always, but the path beyond disappeared into absolute darkness. The lampposts that usually lit the winding trail through the park were already dead, their bulbs gray and lifeless. I stopped at the park entrance, my breath coming in short bursts that formed ghostly white clouds in the cold air. To my right, I could see the glowing windows of the all-night diner 3 blocks away. If I went around the park instead of through it, I'd add almost a mile to my walk. But at least there would be people, cars, and light. My phone buzzed, the battery indicator flashed red with 2% remaining. I'd forgotten to charge it at work again. Screw it, I muttered, stuffing the phone back in my pocket. I'd walked through this park 1,000 times. I knew every bend in the path, every bench, every tree. 20 minutes around, or 5 minutes through. Simple math. I stepped onto the park path. The gravel crunched under my shoes, a sound unnaturally loud in the darkness. The trees were just shapes, darker patches against the navy blue sky. A slight breeze stirred the branches, sending leaves skittering across the ground. My eyes gradually adjusted to the dark. The moon was just past full, providing enough light to make out the path ahead. I walked quickly, keeping my head down and my shoulders hunched. The faster I moved, the louder the gravel seemed to crunch. The sound echoed off the trees, making it impossible to tell if the footsteps I heard were just my own. Halfway through the park, I heard a distinct snap of a twig to my left. I froze. The night went suddenly and completely silent. No crickets, no distant traffic, no rustling leaves. Just the sound of my own breathing and the thunder of blood in my ears. I waited, straining to hear anything in the darkness. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. Nothing moved. Hello? I called out. My voice sounded small and weak. No response. I started walking again, faster now. My dress shoes weren't made for this pace, and I could feel a blister forming on my right heel. I didn't care. Every shadow looked like a person. Every tree trunk could have been hiding someone or something. The park exit was just ahead. I could see streetlights burning on the residential streets beyond. Normal, steady lights that didn't go out when I approached. Almost there. Another twig snapped, closer this time. and another. The sounds were coming from both sides now, moving parallel to the path. Something was pacing me in the darkness. I broke into a run. Gravel sprayed from beneath my feet. My briefcase bounced against my leg as I sprinted toward the park exit. Behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of running footsteps. Multiple sets, moving fast. I burst out of the park onto Cherry Street. The streetlight directly overhead flickered and died as I passed under it. I didn't stop running. My lungs burned. The muscles in my legs screamed in protest. 4 blocks to go. 3, 2, 1. I reached my street, Hampton Drive. Every light on the block went dark as I approached, like dominoes falling in sequence. My house was halfway down, a small Cape Cod with white trim and blue shutters. Home. Safety. I fumbled with my keys as I ran up the front walk. The porch light flickered and went out just as I reached the door. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely get the key in the lock. That's when I saw it, a small white square stuck to the door at eye level. A note written in black ink with precise angular handwriting. Pear. I dropped my keys. They clattered on the porch boards. For a long moment, I just stared at that single word. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. The note was written on expensive paper, thick and textured. The ink looked fresh. It hadn't been there long. I reached out to touch it, but stopped with my finger an inch away from the surface. Something told me not to make contact with it. Movement caught my eye. At the end of my driveway, a figure stood motionless in the darkness. Just a shadow, really, a deeper patch of black against the night. But I could feel it watching me. I snatched my keys from the porch and jammed them into the lock. The door swung open and I practically fell inside, slamming it shut behind me and throwing all 3 dead bolts. I stood in my dark entryway, gasping for breath. My legs felt weak. I reached for the light switch with trembling fingers and flipped it up. Nothing happened. I tried again and again. The power was out, but that was impossible. I could see lights on in other houses through my windows, and the street lights were working again too, their glow visible through the front blinds. Just not in my house. My phone was dead. The lights wouldn't work, and somewhere outside something was watching, waiting. I moved through the dark house, checking every window, every door. Everything was locked. I pulled all the blinds and curtains closed. In the kitchen, I found a flashlight in the emergency drawer and clicked it on. The beam was weak. The batteries were almost dead. I sat at my kitchen table, the failing flashlight propped up to provide what illumination it could. My hands had finally stopped shaking enough to hold a pen. I needed to write this down while it was fresh, while I could still remember every detail. The note on my door had said, Pear. Just that one word. Stop. Stop what? I'd been working late more and more over the past few months. The Peterson account wasn't the only one that kept me at the office until midnight. Things had been slipping, projects falling behind, deadlines missed. My boss had called me in last week for a discussion about performance. The truth was I couldn't focus anymore. Not since Sarah left. Not since the dreams started. The dreams. God, how could I have forgotten about the dreams? They started 3 weeks ago. Always the same. I'm walking through darkness, following a path I can't see. Lights go out as I pass. Something follows me, always just out of sight. And at the end, there's a door with a note. The note in the dream said, Pear, 2. The flashlight flickered. The beam dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. I grabbed it and shook it, but the light continued to fade. A sound came from somewhere in the house. Footsteps, soft and measured, moved across the floor above me. My bedroom. The flashlight went out. In the sudden darkness, I heard more footsteps. They were coming down the stairs now, slow and deliberate. Each step creaked under an unseen weight. I couldn't move. My muscles had locked up. I sat frozen in my kitchen chair, staring at the doorway that led to the front hall. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. They crossed the hall, moving closer to the kitchen. Closer to me. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Darker than the darkness around it, a void in the shape of a person. It spoke. The voice was familiar. So familiar it made my chest ache. But it was impossible. It couldn't be possible. I told you to stop, Sarah said. The shape moved into the kitchen. I could see details now. The outline of her face, her hair, the clothes she'd been wearing that night, 3 months ago. The night of the accident. The night I'd worked late again. leaving her to drive home alone in the rain. "Sarah," I whispered. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." She stood directly across from me now. Her form was more solid, more real. But her eyes were wrong. They were completely black. The streetlights outside suddenly blazed brighter, their glow seeping through the closed blinds. Sarah's shape became transparent, then translucent, then just a suggestion of movement in the air. "Stop," she whispered. Her voice was fading too, becoming distant. "Just stop." Then she was gone. I sat in my dark kitchen for a long time. Eventually the power came back on. The refrigerator hummed to life. The microwave clock blinked 12. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was working again, fully charged. I had 17 missed calls from work. The time showed 3:33 a.m. I picked up the phone and called my boss' direct line. It went to voicemail, of course. At this hour, it would. "Hey Jim," I said. "I need to take some time off. Personal leave. Starting now. He'll email HR in the morning, but I need to stop for a while. I need to deal with some things." I ended the call and set the phone down. For the first time in months, the constant knot of tension in my chest began to loosen. Outside, the street lights were burning steady and bright. No flickering, no darkness following in my wake. I got up and went to my front door. The note was still there, stark white against the dark wood. I took it down carefully and unfolded it. There was more writing inside that I hadn't seen before. "Stop running. Start healing. I love you. Shaws." I held the note for a moment longer, then let it fall from my fingers. It dissolved before it hit the floor, falling away into nothing but motes of light that faded like stars at dawn. The first light of morning was starting to show in the east. I needed to sleep. Real sleep, not the caffeine-fueled dozing I'd been surviving on. Tomorrow, I'll call a grief counselor. I'll start going through Sarah's things that I've boxed up and hidden in the spare room. I'll visit her grave for the first time since the funeral. I'll stop running. It's time to face the darkness and let it pass through me instead of trying to stay one step ahead of it. Time to heal. Time to begin again. The first time it happened, I was lying on the bed reading emails on my phone. The TV clicked on by itself at 2:17 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I checked my phone when I heard the static. The screen showed my black Honda Civic parked right outside room 1114 where I was staying. Not a recording. A live feed. My half-empty Mountain Dew can sat on the hood where I'd left it earlier. I got up and turned off the TV using the power button. My hand was shaking. 10 minutes later, it turned on again by itself. Same feed. Same view of my car. It's 3:45 a.m. now. The TV has turned on 4 more times in the past hour. I'm sitting in the chair by the window, watching both the TV and my car directly through the thin curtains. My throat is dry. The air conditioning hums. Every few minutes I wipe my palms on my jeans. I should leave. I know I should leave. But each time I stand up to go, the TV clicks on again. The feed shows different angles now. Sometimes from the front of my car, sometimes from the back, sometimes from above. Like there are multiple cameras tracking it. But when I look outside, I don't see any cameras. Just the empty parking lot, the flickering neon motel sign, and my car sitting there under the yellow security light. I didn't plan to stop here. I was driving from Chicago to Denver for a job interview tomorrow. Today, technically, the position would be a huge step up from my current role. Senior systems engineer at twice my current salary. But around 11 p.m. my eyes started getting heavy on I-8. The signs for the Valley View Motel came at the right time. Clean rooms, $49.99 a night, HBO included. Good enough. The front desk clerk barely looked up from his phone when I checked in. He had acne scars and a patchy beard. Slid me the key card without a word. I didn't ask questions. Just wanted to crash for 6 hours and get back on the road. The room was what you'd expect. Thin carpet that had seen better days. A bed with a scratchy comforter. Water stains on the ceiling. But it was quiet and dark. I brought in my overnight bag, laptop case, and the Mountain Dew from the car. Took a quick shower. The water pressure was decent. At least, I was almost asleep when the TV first came on. Now I can't even think about sleeping. The feed just switched again. This time it's showing the driver's side door. There's something different. I squint at the screen. A scratch in the paint near the handle. It wasn't there before. I press my face against the window glass to compare. My heart pounds against my ribs. The scratch is there on my actual car too, fresh and white against the black paint. Someone is out there. Someone is doing this. I grab my phone to call the police, but there's no signal. Of course there's no signal. I try the room phone next. Dead tone. The TV clicks off, then immediately back on. Now it's showing the trunk. There's another scratch appearing, being carved into the metal in real time. I can't see anyone doing it. The paint just peels away in a straight line, like an invisible knife is slicing through it. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely hold my room key. I need to get out of here.
What if they're waiting by my car?
What if that's what they want to make me go outside? The scratches are forming letters. I watch them appear one by one on the TV screen. Come outside. No way. No fucking way am I going out there. I back away from the window and sit on the bed. My heart is hammering so hard I feel lightheaded. Sweat rolls down my neck. The TV switches off. Again, the silence feels heavy. 5 seconds pass. 10. When it comes back on the cameras, inside my car, looking out through the windshield, my breath catches in my throat. The Mountain Dew can has gone from the hood. It's on the dashboard now. Inside the locked car, I hear a sound from the bathroom. Metal scratching against metal. Oh God. The same scratching sound that was coming from my car. But that's impossible. The bathroom door is closed. I never closed it. My legs won't move. I stare at the bathroom door, willing it to stay shut. The scratching gets louder. The TV feed switches back to show the car's empty interior again. Something moves in the corner of the frame, just a blur. There and gone. The bathroom doorknob starts to turn. I finally unfreeze. I grab my phone and room key and run. The door feels like it takes forever to open. I hear the bathroom door opening behind me as I stumble into the parking lot. The night air hits my face. I run to my car, fumbling with the key fob. The locks click open and I throw myself inside, slamming and locking the doors. The engine starts on the first try. I drop the car into reverse and stomp the gas. The TV in my room is visible through the window as I back out. It's still on, showing an empty parking space where my car was sitting just a few seconds ago. Something moves in my rearview mirror. A dark shape in the back seat. I whip my head around. Nothing there. When I look back at the mirror, I see it again. Just for a second. A face. My face. But wrong. The eyes are completely black. I drive. The speedometer needle climbs past 90, past 100. The highway is empty. Every few minutes I check the mirror, but the back seat stays empty. The sun starts to come up around 6 a.m. I don't stop until I'm in Denver. I missed the job interview. Didn't even call to cancel. Just found a different hotel and sat in the room with all the lights on, jumping at every sound. I couldn't look at the TV. Still, then you can't. That was 3 days ago. I drove back to Chicago the long way, avoiding that stretch of I-80 entirely. Left the Honda at a dealership and bought a different car. Changed my phone number too. But last night my new TV turned on by itself at 2:17 a.m. The screen showed my new car parked on the street outside my apartment. There was a Mountain Dew can sitting on the hood. I'm in my car now, heading west again. No destination in mind. Just driving. The TV feed will probably follow me wherever I go. Maybe that's the point. To keep me moving. Keep me running. From what? I don't know. All I know is I keep checking my rearview mirror. And sometimes just for a second, I see those black eyes staring back at me. My face. But not my face. Watching. Always watching. I should pull over soon. I'm tired. There's a motel up ahead. Looks cheap. Quiet. Clean rooms. The sign says. HBO included. Maybe I'll stop. Maybe I'll keep driving. But I know one thing for sure. If I do stop, I'm not turning on the TV. I didn't want to be in the library at 11:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating pools of harsh white light between long shadows from the towering bookshelves. My psychology textbook sat open on the wooden table, notes scattered around it. My third cup of coffee had gone cold. I needed to pass tomorrow's exam, and my apartment was too noisy with my roommates. Party going on. The Anderson Library stayed open until 2 a.m. during finals week. Usually there would be other students around, but tonight the fourth floor was empty. Just rows and rows of books on psychology and sociology, the smell of old paper, and the constant hum of the air conditioning. I rubbed my eyes. The words on the page had started to blur together. As I reached for my coffee cup, movement caught my eye. Just a quick flash of something dark passing between the shelves, about 30 feet away. I froze with my hand mid-air. "Hello?" My voice came out hoarse from hours of silence. No response. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the carpet. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet space. I walked toward where I'd seen the movement, my shoes making soft shuffling sounds. The gap between the shelves was empty, just books, stretching up toward the ceiling. A soft thud came from the next row over. My heart rate picked up. It could be another student, but something felt wrong. The hair on my arms stood up. I moved to the end of the shelf, peering around the corner. Nothing. But on the floor lay an open book, as if someone had just dropped it there. I approached it carefully, looking both ways down the long aisle of shelves. The book was old, bound in dark brown leather with no title on the cover. It lay open to a yellowed page filled with handwritten text. As I bent down to pick it up, the first paragraph caught my eye and my stomach dropped. I am always alone in the empty building. The lights flicker above me. I hear footsteps behind me, but when I turn, no one is there. I walk down long corridors that seem to stretch forever. At the end, I see a door. I know I shouldn't open it, but I always do. Behind it stands a tall figure in black, its face hidden in shadow. It reaches for me with hands that are too long, fingers like bare branches. I try to run, but my legs won't move. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. And then it touches me, its cold fingers on my neck. And I slam the book shut. My hands were shaking. This was my dream. The exact dream I'd been having for the past 3 months, written out in detail on that page. The dream I'd never told anyone about. The lights flickered. My heart pounded against my ribs as I spun around, clutching the book to my chest. The aisle behind me was empty, but I heard soft footsteps from somewhere in the stacks. They were getting closer. I backed up slowly, trying to control my breathing. The footsteps stopped. Then came the sound of books being pulled off shelves and dropping to the floor. One after another, getting nearer, thud, thud, thud. I turned and ran, not caring about the noise I made. I had to get back to my table, grab my stuff, and get out. The book felt cold in my hands. When I reached my study spot, everything was gone. My textbook, my notes, my backpack, all of it had vanished. Even my coffee cup was missing. The table was completely bare. The lights flickered again, this time longer. In the moment of darkness, I heard movement behind me. When the lights came back on, I couldn't move. I knew what I would see if I turned around, the same thing I saw in my dreams. The air grew cold. I could see my breath forming clouds in front of my face. The book in my hands seemed to pulse, like something inside it was alive. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me to run, I turned around. It stood there, exactly as in my dreams. Tall, impossibly tall, its head nearly touching the ceiling. It wore what looked like a black coat that moved slightly, even though there was no wind. Where its face should have been was only darkness. I tried to step backward, but my legs wouldn't work. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The figure raised one arm, extending it toward me. Its fingers were long and thin, like bare tree branches in winter. The lights went out completely. I felt cold fingers touch the back of my neck. When they found me the next morning, I was sitting at my study table. All my things were there: textbook, notes, backpack, even my cold coffee. The security guard said I must have fallen asleep studying, but the book was still in my hands. I opened it later in my apartment. The page with my dream was gone. Instead, there was a new entry, written in the same handwriting. I am always in the library late at night. I see someone studying at a table. I move between the shelves, letting them catch glimpses of me. I drop the book where they will find it. They read about their dream, the one I gave them. When the lights go out, I reach for them with my long fingers. But this time, something is different. This time they have the book. This time they become like me. That was 3 months ago. I still go to the library every night. I move between the shelves, watching the late night studiers. I drop the book where they will find it. And when they read about their dreams, the dreams I give them, I reach out with my long fingers. I'm watching someone right now. They're reading this story, thinking it's just words on a page. They don't feel the cold air yet. They haven't noticed the lights starting to flicker. They haven't seen me moving in the shadows behind them. but they will. The lights in the library always go out eventually, and my fingers are so very, very long. I try to remember my life before the library, but those memories feel distant now, like scenes from a movie I watched long ago. I remember being a psychology student worrying about exams and rent payments and normal things. Now I walk the stacks endlessly, my feet making no sound on the carpet. During the day, I hide in the deepest parts of the building, in the narrow spaces between walls where the pipes run. I watch through gaps in the shelves as students browse for books, laughing and chatting, stressing about assignments. Sometimes I reach out and brush their shoulders with my fingertips just to feel their warmth, to remember what it was like to be alive. But it's the night that truly belongs to me now. When the library empties out and the shadows grow long, I emerge. I glide between the shelves, letting my fingers trail along the spines of books. I know every inch of this place, every creaking floorboard, every flickering light, every hidden corner where someone might try to hide. The book appears whenever I need it. I don't know where it comes from. Sometimes I find it waiting for me on an empty table. Sometimes it falls from a shelf as I pass. The leather cover is always cool to the touch, and the pages contain the dreams of whoever I'm hunting that night. I remember the confusion on their faces when they read their own private nightmares printed on those yellowed pages. The way their hands shake, the quick darting glances over their shoulders, the rapid breathing and pounding hearts that I can sense from across the room. Time moves strangely here. Nights blur together. I can tell if I've been this way for months, or years, or decades. Maybe the person who turned me into this was once like me, a student who stayed too late, who found the wrong book, who felt those cold fingers on their neck in the darkness. Sometimes I wonder if I could stop, choose not to hunt, choose not to leave the book where someone will find it. But the hunger grows too strong. The emptiness inside me can only be filled by taking others and making them like me. The book demands to be read. The dreams demand to be shared. Tonight's victim is different, though. They've been coming to the library for weeks, always sitting at the same table near the psychology section. They read for hours, taking careful notes. Sometimes they talk to themselves softly, working through complex ideas. I've been watching them longer than I usually do. Something about them seems familiar, but I can't place it. Maybe they remind me of myself back when I was still human. Maybe that's why I've hesitated to drop the book. But the hunger is too strong now. I can feel the book growing cold in my hands, ready to be found. The lights above their table have started to flicker, just slightly, not enough for them to notice yet. Soon they will see movement in the corner of their eye. Soon they will follow me into the stacks. Soon they will read their dreams on those ancient pages. Soon their warm flesh will grow cold, their fingers will lengthen, their face will fade into shadow. Soon they will walk the library with me, hunting others on endless nights. The lights flicker again. I move closer, letting them catch a glimpse of my dark form between the shelves. They look up from their books, brow furrowed. I drop the volume carefully, letting it fall with a soft thud. They stand. They start walking toward the sound. The hunt begins again. The red numbers on my dashboard showed 2:17 a.m. when the headlights first appeared in my rearview mirror. I was driving down Interstate 41 in Wisconsin, the kind of empty stretch where you might not see another car for an hour. The fog had gotten thick enough that I had to slow to 45 miles per hour, and my high beams just bounced back at me off the wall of gray. I'd been on the road for 14 hours, pushing through from Detroit to Minneapolis for a sales meeting. I couldn't miss. The coffee from my last stop had gone cold and my eyes burned. I blinked hard and cranked up the AC to stay alert. That's when I noticed them, 2 bright dots floating in the distance behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. Finally, another car on this dead stretch of road. Maybe they'd passed me since I was going so slow, but they didn't. The lights stayed exactly the same distance behind me, floating in that sea of fog like ghost eyes. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I watched those lights. Something felt wrong. They were maintaining the exact same distance, not gaining, not falling back, just following. I pressed the gas a little harder, nudging up to 50 miles per hour. The lights matched my speed perfectly. Just another car going the same way. I muttered to myself. My voice sounded strange in the quiet car. I hadn't spoken in hours. I took the next curve a little faster than I should have. Tires humming against the wet asphalt. The headlights behind me swung through the turn at the same speed, maintaining that precise distance. My stomach tightened. This wasn't normal driving behavior. Nobody maintains that exact of a following distance, especially not in fog this thick. I hit the brakes suddenly, dropping to 30 miles per hour. The lights behind me slowed instantly, keeping that same gap. No normal driver could have matched that reaction time. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I accelerated hard, pushing my Honda up to 65 despite the fog. The engine wound and protested, but those lights stayed with me pace for pace. Sweat broke out on my forehead. I wasn't imagining this. They were following me deliberately. The fog pressed in closer until I could barely see 20 feet ahead. I was driving too fast for these conditions, but panic had taken hold. I needed to get away from whatever was behind me. A green highway sign loomed out of the gray. Rest area 1 mile. I hit my turn signal and took the exit ramp way too fast, tires screeching. The headlights swung onto the ramp behind me without hesitation. The rest area was deserted, except for a single semi-truck parked in the back corner. I pulled into a spot near the entrance and killed my engine, hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. The headlights pulled into the space directly behind me and then went dark. I sat there breathing hard, staring into my rearview mirror. In the dim light from the overhead lamps, I could make out the shape of a car. It looked like an old Crown Victoria, maybe a retired police cruiser. But the fog was so thick, I couldn't see any details. After 5 minutes of silence, I started my engine again. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I pulled out of the rest area, hands still trembling slightly. The Crown Vic's headlights blazed to life the instant I started moving. "Fuck this," I said out loud and floored it. The Honda's engine roared as I flew down the on-ramp, pushing 80 before I even merged back onto the highway. Those lights stayed right with me, matching every move. I took the next exit I saw, some county road that wound through farmland. The Crown Vic followed. I made random turns onto progressively smaller roads, trying to lose them. Left onto a gravel road, right onto a narrow strip of crumbling asphalt, and another right onto what was barely more than a tractor path. Those headlights stayed with me through every turn, every acceleration, every sudden brake check. My hands were soaked with sweat on the wheel. My heart felt like it was trying to punch through my chest. I came to a T intersection and turned left without signaling, tires throwing gravel. The Crown Vic made the turn just as smoothly. The fog had gotten even thicker out here in the countryside, turning the world into a gray void beyond my headlights. Up ahead, a sign emerged from the fog. Gas and go. 24 hours. A small gas station appeared, a bright island in the darkness. I yanked the wheel hard, cutting across the empty lot and screeching to a stop next to a pump. The Crown Vic pulled in behind me, blocking my exit. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my seatbelt unbuckled. I needed help. I needed to get inside where there were people. I reached for the door handle. A knock on my window made me jump and cry out. An older man in a gas and go uniform stood there, his face pale in the fluorescent lights. He gestured for me to roll down my window. I hit the button, lowering it just a crack. "Thank God you're here. These people have been following me for—" "Don't turn around," the attendant whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "Whatever you do, don't look in your back seat." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Slowly I became aware of a sound I'd been hearing for the last hour, but hadn't consciously registered. Quiet breathing coming from behind me. I started to turn my head. "No," the attendant hissed. "Listen to me. Keep looking straight ahead. I'm gonna walk away now, real casual like. Count to 10. Then get out of your car, calm and normal, and walk into the store. Don't run. Don't look back. Understand?" I managed a tiny nod. My throat was too tight to speak. The attendant straightened up and walked away, whistling off-key. I stared straight ahead through the windshield, counting in my head. The breathing behind me seemed louder now that I was aware of it. 1, 2, 3. There was a slight shift of weight in the back seat. Something brushed against the headrest. 4, 5, 6. A soft scraping sound, like fingernails on fabric. 7, 8. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel something leaning forward. 9. Hot breath on my neck. 10. I threw open my door and walked toward the store, forcing myself to move at a normal pace. Every instinct screamed at me to run. My legs felt like they were moving through molasses. The distance to the store entrance stretched out impossibly long. Behind me, I heard car doors opening, multiple car doors. My pace quickened, despite myself. 10 more steps to the door. 5 more steps. Footsteps behind me. More than one set. I reached for the handle of the glass door, seeing my reflection and what was behind me. I yanked the door open and dove inside, slamming it shut. The attendant was already there with a key, locking it. He pulled me behind the counter and shoved me down. "Stay down," he ordered, then grabbed something from under the counter, a shotgun. I crouched there, shaking as heavy footsteps approached the door. The bell above it jingled as something tried the handle. "You can come in here," the attendant shouted. "This is holy ground." I blessed every inch. The sound came from outside, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. The door rattled in its frame. I said, "You can't come in," the attendant repeated. He pumped the shotgun. "Don't make me use this. It's loaded with salts and silver." The rattling stopped. For a long moment there was complete silence. Then footsteps moving away. Car doors opening and closing and engines starting. I stayed crouched behind the counter, trembling until the attendant touched my shoulder. "They're gone," he said quietly. For now, I stood on shaky legs and looked out the window. The Crown Vic was gone. My Honda sat alone under the fluorescent lights, all 4 doors standing open.
What?
My voice cracked. I swallowed and tried again. What were they? The attendant was already pulling bottles of whiskey from under the counter. He poured 2 generous glasses. "Drink this first," he said, handing me one. "Then I'll tell you what I know about the followers in the fog and why they're gonna keep hunting you now that they've marked you as prey." I drained the whiskey in one gulp, feeling it burn all the way down. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like gray hands trying to get in. "Start from the beginning," I said. "Tell me everything." The attendant poured us both another drink. It started about 10 years ago when the first person came running into my store talking about being followed on the highway. Back then, I didn't believe them. Thought they were just road weary and seeing things in the fog. He took a long swallow of whiskey. Then I saw what was following them, saw what climbed out of that Crown Vic. After that night, I started preparing. Holy water in the sprinkler system, salt lines under every threshold, silver buckshot in the shotgun shells. But what are they? I asked again. Nobody knows for certain. They only appear in the thickest fog, always in that same crown. Victoria, always following travelers until they're too tired or scared to think straight. Some folks say they're the ghosts of highway patrolmen killed in the line of duty. Others think they're something older, something that used to hunt travelers on horseback or on foot, now adapted to the modern age. He refilled our glasses. All I know for sure is they're hungry, and once they've picked a target, they don't give up easily. I stared down into my whiskey. "So what do I do now?" "You stay here until dawn. The fog always lifts with the sun and they never hunt in daylight. After that," he shrugged, "keep driving. Stay out of fog banks. If you see those headlights again, find holy ground, a church, a temple, consecrated soil, or find me. You'll be here." And if I can't find either in time, he met my eyes. "Then whatever you do, don't look in your back seat." We sat in silence after that, watching the fog swirl against the windows. Somewhere in that gray void, I knew they were waiting. Waiting for me to get back on the road. Waiting for the next thick bank of fog. I checked my phone, still 3 hours until sunrise. I poured myself another whiskey and settled in to wait, trying not to think about what would have happened if I turned around in my car. Trying not to think about what was breathing down my neck in those final seconds. Trying not to think about the next foggy night I had to drive through. Outside, the fog pressed closer, and somewhere in the distance I thought I saw 2 faint lights waiting in the gray. The first sign something was wrong came at 2:17 a.m. on Interstate 80, somewhere between North Platte and Grand Island, Nebraska. I checked the time because my phone buzzed with a low battery warning, right before the headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. I'd been driving for almost 6 hours straight, trying to make it to Chicago by morning for an important client meeting. The coffee from my last stop had gone cold, and my eyes burned from staring at the empty road ahead. The fog had rolled in about an hour ago, thick and heavy, cutting visibility down to maybe 50 feet in front of my Honda Civic. I barely noticed the headlights at first. Just another car on the interstate, I thought. But after 10 minutes of the same distance between us, I started paying attention. The fog made it hard to see much, just 2 bright circles floating in the white wall behind me. They stayed perfectly steady, never getting closer or falling behind. I tapped the brake pedal, watching my speed drop from 65 to 55. The headlights matched my deceleration exactly, maintaining that same gap. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Could be a cop, I told myself. but there was no light bar visible, just those two unwavering beams. I sped up to 75, breaking the speed limit. The car behind me accelerated in perfect sync. The distance didn't change by an inch. My heart started beating faster, and I felt sweat forming on my palms. "All right, let's see how you handle this," I muttered, spotting an exit ahead. I waited until the last possible second before yanking the wheel right, not even bothering to signal. My tires squealed as I took the exit ramp way too fast. The headlights followed, making the exact same turn at the exact same speed. Shit, I wiped my forehead with my sleeve. The exit led to a narrow county road that wound through empty farmland. The fog seemed even thicker here, pressing in around my car like a solid wall. My high beams just reflected back at me, so I had to use regular lights, creeping along at 40 miles per hour to avoid running off the road. Those headlights stayed right behind me, matching every curve, every slight adjustment in speed. I couldn't make out any details of the vehicle. The fog reduced it to just those two glowing circles, hanging in the air like eyes. I tried calling 911, but my phone showed no signal. Of course, I was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cornfields and fog. The digital clock on my dashboard showed 2:36 a.m. A sign loomed out of the fog. Sharp curve ahead, 25 miles per hour. Perfect. I maintained my speed until the last second, then slammed on the brakes and cranked the wheel hard left. The tires screamed. My car fishtailed, nearly spinning out before I recovered. The headlights behind me made the turn just as smoothly as if they were on rails. No tire squeal, no sliding, just that same unchanging distance. My hands were shaking now. I couldn't keep driving like this. I'd end up wrapping my car around a tree. I needed to find somewhere to stop, somewhere with people and lights. But all I could see through the fog were endless fields and occasional farmhouses, all dark and silent. I grabbed my phone again, trying to pull up Google Maps. The screen was frozen, showing my location as a blue dot in the middle of nothing. The battery indicator blinked red at 5%. That's when I noticed something else in the rearview mirror, something that made my blood run cold. The headlights seemed higher than before, like the car behind me was somehow floating upward. I blinked hard and looked again. No, I wasn't imagining it. The beams were definitely higher and slightly tilted, as if the vehicle was riding on an incline. But the road was completely flat. My foot pressed harder on the gas pedal. The engine wound up as I pushed it past 80, taking the curves way too fast. I didn't care anymore about safety. I just needed to get away from whatever was behind me. The headlights kept pace effortlessly, now tilted at an impossible angle, like the car was driving up an invisible hill. They had to be at least 10 feet off the ground. I was hyperventilating, my chest tight with panic. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. I forced myself to take slower breaths, knowing I'd crash if I passed out. Through the fog ahead, I saw a faint glow. As I got closer, it resolved into the fluorescent lights of a gas station. The sign said, "Last stop 50 miles." I nearly cried with relief. I yanked the wheel and skidded into the parking lot, braking hard. My car rocked to a stop next to one of the pumps. The headlights behind me vanished. For a moment, I just sat there, hands clenched on the wheel, gasping for breath. The gas station looked abandoned. No cars at the pumps. No movement inside the small convenience store. But there were lights on, which meant someone had to be working. I grabbed my phone, but it was completely dead now. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely get my seatbelt unbuckled. I needed to get inside, to find whoever was working, and call the police. The store's glass door jingled as I pushed it open. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Rows of snacks and drinks stood in perfect order, undisturbed. Behind the counter, a man in his 60s looked up from a newspaper. His name tag said Earl. "Need some gas?" he asked, then stopped. His eyes widened as he looked past me through the glass door. "There was someone following me," I said, the words tumbling out. On the highway, then the county road. They wouldn't stop, no matter what I did. "Did you see where they went?" Earl's face had gone pale. He was staring at something behind me, his mouth opening and closing without making a sound. "What?" I started to turn around. "Don't." His voice was barely a whisper. "Don't look back there. They're in your back seat." My entire body went rigid. The air seemed to freeze in my lungs. I could feel it now, a presence behind me, inside my locked car. The weight that had been making my car ride slightly low in the back all this time. The headlights, Earl whispered, they weren't following you. They were trying to warn you. Slowly, against every screaming instinct, I turned my head just enough to see my car through the store's window. The interior was dark, but I could make out shapes in the back seat. Shapes that shouldn't have been there. Shapes that were moving. I saw long pale fingers pressing against the window glass. A face, no, multiple faces, pressing forward from the shadows. Their eyes reflected the fluorescent light like animals' eyes in the dark. My legs gave out. I collapsed against the counter, sliding to the floor. Above me, Earl was already reaching for the phone, but I knew it was too late. They had been riding with me for hours, waiting, and now they knew that I knew. Through the window I watched as the back doors of my car slowly began to open. They moved with a fluid grace that wasn't human, unfolding themselves from the back seat. In the harsh fluorescent light, I could see them clearly now. Their bodies were too long, too thin, joints bending in ways that bones shouldn't allow. Their skin was the color of old paper, stretched tight over sharp angles. Their faces. I can describe their faces. I don't want to remember their faces. They walked toward the store on legs that bent, backward, fingers dragging along the ground. The door jingled. Earl was shouting into the phone, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch as they came for me, their mouths opening to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. The last thing I remember is their cold hands touching my face and a voice like dry leaves, scraping against concrete. Thank you for the ride. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Grand Island. The doctor said a trucker found me unconscious in the parking lot of an abandoned gas station. My car was gone. When the police tried to track down Earl, they discovered the station had been closed for over a year. I took a bus back to Chicago. I don't drive at night anymore. And whenever I see headlights in my rearview mirror, I check the back seat, just to be sure. Because sometimes late at night, I still feel that weight behind me. Still see those pale faces in my dreams. Still hear that voice thanking me for the ride. And I wonder how many other drivers are out there right now on dark and foggy roads, with passengers they don't know about. How many sets of headlights are trying to warn them? So if you're driving alone at night and you see headlights that seem to be following you too closely, don't try to run. Don't try to lose them. They're not following you. They're trying to save you. Look in your back seat. Look while you still can, because they're patient. These things that ride with us, they'll wait until the perfect moment, till you're too far from help, too tired to fight back. And by then, it's already too late. The headlights behind you aren't a threat. They never were. The threat was sitting behind you all along, just waiting for you to realize it was there. Just waiting for you to turn around. I should have paid more attention to that damn scarecrow from the start. Maybe if I had, things would have turned out differently. But when you're busy gutting a 100-year-old farmhouse down to the studs, you don't waste time worrying about what's happening in the neighbor's cornfield. At least that's what I told myself during those first few days. I bought the old Morrison place in late September, after the bank foreclosed on it. The house had sat empty for 2 years, and showed it. The white paint had gone gray and started peeling. Half the shutters hung crooked, and the porch sagged in the middle like a tired horse. But the bones were good. Solid oak frame, fieldstone foundation, cedar shingles under all that weather damage. Perfect for someone like me, who knows his way around power tools and doesn't mind putting in the work. The first time I noticed the scarecrow, I was replacing rotted boards on the back deck. It stood in the middle of the Hendersons' cornfield, maybe 200 yards from my property line. Just a typical scarecrow, faded plaid shirt stuffed with straw, patched jeans, an old burlap sack for a head with a dirty felt hat on top. Its arms stuck straight out like it was trying to hug the sky. 3 days later, while I was stripping wallpaper in the kitchen, I looked out the window and froze. The scarecrow was closer. Not by much, maybe 20 or 30 feet, but definitely closer to my property. I walked out to the edge of my yard and stared at it. The thing looked exactly the same, just nearer. The corn had already been harvested, leaving only dry stalks and neat rows, so I could see the scarecrow's post clearly planted in the dirt. I'm not the kind of guy who gets spooked easily. 20 years as a contractor, I've worked in plenty of old houses with weird creaks and shadows. But something about that scarecrow made the hair on my neck stand up. I walked over to the Hendersons' place, a neat white farmhouse about a quarter mile down the road. Bill Henderson answered the door in dirty overalls. His wife, Sarah, stood behind him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "The scarecrow in your field," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did you move it recently?" They both shook their heads. "Haven't touched that old thing in years," Bill said. "Why'd you ask?" I shrugged. "Just curious. It seemed like it was in a different spot." Sarah frowned. "That's odd. It's been on the same post since Bill's father put it up. Must be 30 years ago now." I nodded and thanked them, feeling foolish. Obviously, I had just misjudged the distance the first time I saw it. Memory plays tricks sometimes. The next morning, I went out early to get started on the roof repairs. The scarecrow had moved again. Now it stood barely 100 yards from my property line. I could see details I hadn't noticed before. The frayed edges of its shirt sleeves, the patches sewn onto its knees, and the crude face someone had drawn on its burlap head with black paint. 2 dots for eyes, a crooked line for a mouth. I grabbed my phone and took pictures, marking the scarecrow's position relative to a broken fence post and an old oak tree. Then I drove to the hardware store in town, bought a cheap trail camera, and set it up facing the field. If someone was playing games, I'd catch them. That night, I checked the camera. Nothing. Just empty cornfield and the scarecrow standing exactly where it had been that morning. But the next day, it had moved again. 70 yards from my property now. The camera showed no movement, no sign of anyone in the field. Just the scarecrow in 2 different positions, as if someone had cut and pasted it closer to my house while the camera was blinking. I drove back to the Hendersons' place. This time Sarah answered alone. "I know this sounds crazy, but that scarecrow is moving. I've got pictures." She looked at my phone, frowning. "That's strange, but Bill and I haven't touched it. I swear, maybe some kids are messing with you. The trail camera didn't show anyone." "Well, they must have found a way around it. What else could it be?" What else indeed? I didn't sleep well that night, lying in my sleeping bag on the floor of what would eventually be my bedroom. The renovation wasn't far enough along for proper furniture yet. Every time the wind rattled the windows, I sat up and shone my flashlight out into the darkness. The scarecrow was just a black shape against the stars, but I could have sworn its arms were pointing toward my house now. The next morning, it stood 50 yards from my property. The morning after that, 30 yards. Each time the trail camera showed nothing, I set up 2 more cameras covering different angles, still nothing. Just the scarecrow closer every day, its crude painted face seeming to grin wider. I started working faster on the house, pushing myself from dawn to dusk. Part of me wanted to sell the place and run, but I'd sunk too much money into materials already. Besides, I told myself, it's just a scarecrow. Just straw and old clothes on a wooden post. Nothing to be afraid of. Then came the night everything changed. The scarecrow stood just 10 yards from my property line now. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even try. I sat in the dark by my bedroom window, a baseball bat across my knees, watching. The moon cast enough light to see the field clearly. The scarecrow's shadow stretched long across the broken corn stalks. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I remember checking my phone. I heard a scraping sound like dry sticks dragging across dirt. I stared into the darkness, gripping the bat so hard my knuckles went white. The scarecrow's arms moved, not swaying in the wind. There was no wind. They moved like someone flexing stiff joints. The scraping got louder, and the post pulled free from the earth, with a sound like teeth being pulled. The scarecrow took a step forward. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. Another step. The burlap had tilted to one side. Those painted eyes fixed on my window. Something scratched against the glass. I jumped back, my heart was hammering. Long, thin fingers may have twisted straw pressed against the window pane, leaving dirty streaks. The painted mouth wasn't smiling anymore. It had changed into a dark hole, and something moved inside it, something that glinted wetly in the moonlight. I ran down the stairs out the front door into my truck. The engine roared to life, and I floored it. Gravel sprayed as I peeled out of the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I saw a shape loping across my front yard. Not walking now, but running on all fours like an animal. Straw arms and legs bending in impossible ways. I drove straight through until morning, stopping only for gas. When the sun came up, I called Bill Henderson. "The scarecrow," I said. "Tell me everything you know about it." He was quiet for a long moment. "It wasn't my father who put it up." He finally said, "That's just what we tell people. It showed up one morning in 1973 after 3 children disappeared from farms in the county. They never found the bodies, but no one else disappeared after that scarecrow appeared. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it keeps things away. Bad things worse than itself. That's why we never touched it. Why we pretended not to notice when it moved. It's like a guard dog. As long as you feed it regularly, it stays loyal. Feed it. Feed it what? Fear, he said. It feeds on fear. Every now and then someone buys that old house. They see the scarecrow move, get scared, run away, and it goes back to its post, satisfied. But if someone stayed, if they didn't run, I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I thought about the dark hole in that burlap face, about what I glimpsed moving inside it, about what might have happened if I'd stayed in that house one more minute. I never went back to the old Morrison place. Lost my investment, my tools, everything I'd left behind. The bank foreclosed again, eventually. Last I heard, some young couple bought it, planning to fix it up. Sometimes I think about warning them, but would they believe me? Would you? The scarecrow's probably back on its post by now, arms spread wide, watching their windows at night, waiting to see if they'll run, wondering what their fear might taste like. And if they don't run well, maybe there'll be more disappearances in the county. Maybe something worse than a scarecrow is getting hungry. I still check the local news sometimes. Still wake up at 3:17 a.m. Get a heart pounding, remembering those straw fingers, scratching in my window, and I wonder what if I had stayed. What if I had stood my ground, swung that baseball bat, tried to fight, but then I remember that dark hole opening in the burlap, that wet gleam inside, and I know I made the right choice. Some things aren't meant to be fought. Some fears are meant to be given into. Sometimes running away isn't cowardice, it's survival. Mostly I wonder about that young couple in my old house. I wonder if they've noticed anything strange yet. I wonder if they've looked out their window one morning and seen something just a little bit closer than it was the day before. I wonder if they'll be smart enough to run when the time comes, because it will come. That scarecrow is still out there, standing in that field, waiting, and sooner or later it's going to get hungry again. I check the local news from that county every morning so far. No disappearances so far. No strange reports so far. That young couple is still living in the old Morrison place, still fixing it up, still unaware of what watches them from the cornfield. But I know it's only a matter of time, because scarecrows don't just guard fields. They guard secrets, and sooner or later those secrets have a way of getting out. I should know, I'm keeping one of those secrets right now, typing these words in my safe little apartment, far from any cornfields. But sometimes, when I look out my window at night, I catch a glimpse of something that might be a shadow, might be a trick of the light, might be nothing at all, or it might be something made of straw and darkness, something that followed me all this way, something that's been waiting patiently for me to let my guard down, something that remembers the taste of my fear and wants another bite. The security camera footage showed nothing there, but I saw it. Those claw marks don't lie. I've lived alone on this farm for 12 years since Sarah died. Never had trouble sleeping even during the worst storms, but that night 3 weeks ago changed everything. Now I keep my shotgun by the bed and triple check the locks. Not that locks would stop whatever left those marks. It started around 10 p.m., during the worst thunderstorm we'd had all year. The rain hammered against the windows like someone throwing handfuls of gravel. Wind howled through the cornfields, bending the stalks almost flat. I sat at my kitchen table doing the monthly books and listening to the weather radio warning about possible tornado conditions. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I grabbed my flashlight from the drawer and walked to the window. The security lights around the barn should have kicked in with a generator, but everything stayed dark, strange. I just checked that generator last week. Lightning flashed, lighting up the yard between the house and barn. That's when I saw it. A figure stood perfectly still by the barn door, tall, too tall, had to be at least 8 feet. In that split second of light, I could tell it wasn't human. The proportions were all wrong. The arms hung down past where knees should be. The head looked too small for the body perched on a neck that seemed too long and thin. Thunder crashed when the next lightning flash came a few seconds later, and the figure was gone. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone to check the security camera feed. The app showed all cameras offline. I tried rebooting the system, but nothing works. The storm must have knocked out the wireless network. I stood at the window for almost an hour, watching lightning kept illuminating the yard in strobes. No more sign of the figure. Eventually the power came back on. The security lights hummed to life, casting yellow circles on the wet ground. Still nothing moved out there. I told myself I'd imagined it, tricks of light and shadow during the storm. The mind plays games when you live alone too long. I forced myself to finish the bookkeeping, then headed up to bed around midnight. Sleep wouldn't come. Every crack of thunder made me jolt awake. The wind moaned through the eaves, sounding almost like words around 2 a.m. I heard something that definitely wasn't the storm, a loud scraping sound from the direction of the barn. I got up and went to the bedroom window with my flashlight. The beam caught something moving near the barn door, but it disappeared too fast to make out what it was. Could have been a deer. We get them sometimes seeking shelter from storms. But deer don't leave claw marks 8 feet high. I found those marks the next morning. 4 parallel grooves torn deep into the wood of the barn door, each groove about 3 inches wide. They started way above my head and raked downward almost to the ground. The wood was splintered and gouged out like it had been carved with steel hooks. My hands trembled as I unlocked the barn door. Everything inside looked normal at first glance. The tractor sat where I'd left it, tools hung in their places on the wall, and the hay bales were undisturbed. Then I noticed the smell, a sharp chemical odor like burning plastic mixed with something else, something organic and rotten. It seemed strongest near the back corner where I store old equipment. I followed my nose, but couldn't find the source. I spent the next hour checking every inch of the barn. No signs of entry, no broken windows, no holes in the roof. Just those massive claw marks on the front door. Back in the house, I pulled up the security camera footage from overnight. The system showed it had recorded normally after the power came back on. I scrubbed through the video from around 2 a.m. when I'd heard the scraping sound. The footage showed the barn door clearly in the security lights at 2:17 a.m. The door slowly swung open about halfway. Nothing visible pushed or pulled, it just opened on its own. I went to investigate and found the door open wide, with no signs of forced entry. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that something was watching me from the shadows. I grabbed my flashlight and began to search the area, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Over the next few days, strange things started happening around the house. Doors would slam shut on their own, and objects would move from one room to another. It seemed like someone or something was playing tricks on me, but every time I tried to investigate further, I came up empty-handed. It wasn't until the 3rd night of our 7-day Caribbean cruise that I finally got some answers. 3 sharp knocks at my cabin door jolted me awake at 2:17 a.m., and I knew exactly what it meant. The hungry ones had come for me. I remember the exact time because I checked my phone, thinking it might be ship security about a problem nobody makes social calls at that hour. I sat up in my narrow bed, listening as the air conditioning hummed and the ship's engines thrummed somewhere far below. Then it came again. Knock, 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 harder this time. Like someone using their fist instead of knuckles. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice rough with sleep. No answer, just the constant mechanical noises of the ship. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, irritated now, probably some drunk passenger who got the wrong cabin number. It happens sometimes on these mega cruises where all the corridors looked identical. I politely point them in the right direction and go back to sleep. The knocking came a 3rd time, so forceful it made the door rattle in its frame. My heart jumped. This wasn't normal. I stood up, took 2 steps toward the door, then stopped. Something felt wrong. The aggressive pounding, the late hour, the silence between knocks. It set off warning bells in my head. "If you don't identify yourself, I'm calling security," I said loudly. Nothing. Not even footsteps walking away. I grabbed my phone and dialed the ship's emergency number while it rang. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. The curved fisheye lens showed an empty corridor brightly lit by overhead fluorescence. No one was there. A security officer answered. I explained about the knocking, trying not to sound paranoid. He said they'd check the security cameras and send someone to patrol my deck. "Do you want an officer to come to your cabin now, sir?" he asked. I looked through the peephole again. Still no one. "No, that's okay. Just wanted to report it." Stinks. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully awake now. The whole thing was probably nothing. Some kids playing pranks or a drunk who wandered off. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. My cabin was on deck 8, port side, about midship. It was one of the cheaper interior rooms with no window or balcony, just 4 walls, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a TV mounted opposite the bed, standard cruise ship accommodation. I flipped on the TV, keeping the volume low, and found an old sitcom rerun. The familiar dialogue helped calm my nerves. After about 20 minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from ship security. Reviewed camera footage of Deck 8 corridor from 2:15 to 2:30 a.m. No one visible in hallway during that time. Officer patrolled area all clear. Please call back if knocking resumes. I left the TV on and eventually dozed off again. The rest of the night passed without incidents. The next morning, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing. The ship was docked in St. Thomas, and I spent the day exploring the island, swimming at Megan's Bay and drinking overpriced fruity cocktails at a beach bar. By the time I got back to my cabin that evening, the strange knocking was just a weird memory. I fell asleep easily, pleasantly tired from the sun and alcohol, but at 2:17 a.m. exactly the same time as the night before, I jerked awake. Knock, knock, knock. The pounding was even louder this time, hard enough to make the wall vibrate. I sat frozen in bed, my heart hammering. This couldn't be happening. Who's there? I shouted. My voice cracked. Knock, knock, knock. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands and opened the camera app. If someone was out there, I'd record them. I approached the door slowly, filming through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but as I watched, 3 more thunderous knocks rattled the door on my phone screen. There was nothing, just an empty corridor and a door shaking from an invisible force. I backed away until I hit the bed, nearly dropping my phone. This was impossible. Doors don't knock themselves. I called security again, my voice higher and tighter than I meant it to be. The same officer from the previous night answered. "Sir, we still have cameras on that section of corridor," he said. "I'm looking at the feed right now. There's no one at your door. Then how do you explain the knocking?" I recorded. "Would you like me to send someone up?" "Yes," I practically shouted while I waited. I played back the video I'd taken. The image quality was poor through the peephole, but you could clearly see the empty hallway and hear the thunderous knocking. My hands were trembling so badly it was hard to hold the phone steady. 2 security officers arrived within minutes. They checked the corridor, tested my door, and reviewed my video. Their faces gave nothing away, but I saw them exchange glances. "We'll increase patrols in this area," the senior officer said, "and we can move you to a different cabin if you like." I almost accepted, but something stopped me moving, felt like giving in to fear, letting whatever this was win. Besides, what if it followed me to the new cabin? "No, I'll stay. Can you post someone in the hallway tonight?" They agreed to have an officer patrol past regularly after they left. I turned all the lights on and sat in the room. Single chair facing the door. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day was at sea, no ports of call. I wandered the ship, down in coffee after coffee. I couldn't stop thinking about those knocks in the empty hallway. None of it made sense. Around midday, I went to the ship's guest services desk and asked about the history of my cabin. Had there been any incidents there? Any complaints from previous passengers? The clerk tapped at her computer and shook her head. "Nothing unusual, sir. That cabin has been in regular rotation since the ship launched 3 years ago." I considered telling my family back home what was happening, but stopped myself. They'd either think I was making it up or worry unnecessarily. Better to handle this myself. As night approached, my anxiety grew. I thought about sleeping in one of the public lounges, but that would probably get me kicked out by security instead. I bought 2 Red Bulls from the ship's cafe and prepared for another sleepless night, but 2:17 a.m. came and went without a sound. I waited tense and alert until nearly 4 a.m. before finally letting myself drift off. The next 3 nights passed the same way. Nothing but normal ship noises. The security patrols continued, but found nothing unusual. I started to relax, thinking whatever it was had moved on. Then came the final night of the cruise. I actually managed to fall asleep at a reasonable hour, exhausted from a week of stress and broken rest. At first, I didn't realize what had woken me. The room was dark except for a thin strip of light under the door. The TV was off. My phone showed 2:16 a.m. Something felt different. The air seemed heavier, colder. I lay perfectly still, listening. The digital display on my phone clicked to 2:17 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was different this time, slower, more deliberate, less like someone demanding entry and more like an announcement, a warning. I didn't call out or reach for my phone. I just watched the door barely breathing there. It was a click, and another. The deadbolt was turning by itself. The door swung open slowly, letting in the harsh fluorescent light from the corridor. No one was there, but on the worn carpet leading into my cabin was a trail of wet footprints. They were bare feet, adult-sized, water darkening the carpet with each step as I watched, frozen in terror. A new footprint appeared then. Another. Something invisible was walking into my room. I tried to scream, but my throat closed up. I could only manage a strangled whimper as the footprints moved steadily closer to my bed. The temperature plunged. My breath came out in visible puffs. The footprints stopped at the edge of my bed, water slowly spreading through the carpet fibers. I felt the mattress depressed near my feet, like someone sitting down. The springs creaked under invisible weight. No. I finally managed to whisper, "Please." A cold, wet hand grabbed my ankle. I exploded into motion, ripping free and launching myself toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I was safely in a public area. I never went on another cruise again. Sometimes late at night, I still wake up at exactly 2:17 a.m. I lie in bed, listening for knocks, while my ankle tingles with the memory of that cold, wet grip. I never found out what it wanted. Part of me hopes I never